Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if young Naruto is testing to become a ninja of Konoha and to discover his legacy. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The Sandaime Hokage sat at his desk, still in shock over the events of the past several hours. Konoha was decimated by the Kyuubi no Kitsune, greatest of the nine-tailed lords who had risen to the forefront of the demon pantheon and terrorized as they chose the human world. Minato Urashi Namikaze, last of the wind-using Namikaze clan and his successor, the Yondaime Hokage, was dead, awaiting a state funeral after he exchanged his life with the Shinigami in order to seal the Kyuubi no Kitsune within an infant, his own newborn son. And a ghost from his past now stood in front of his desk, wearing a nondescript hooded black cloak. Under the hood, the Hokage could just make out the gold and silver tattooed features of a woman already old beyond her years when the Hokage had first met her as a young man, foolishly attacking what he thought was an enemy Iwa ninja. "Hello Kabatsu-san. I must admit, I never thought I would see you again. It's been what, 30 years since I last saw you?" Kabatsu Korra chuckled and removed her hood, revealing a woman in her early 30s, her fiery red hair sparkling in the lights of the Hokage's office, the ninja headband around her neck displaying a stylized 8-point star. Sarutobi could not help but be struck by how little she had changed. "Yes, it has been a long time, Sarutobi-san. But what do you expect when we have been keeping ourselves under the radar? Last I heard, you had retired and your great weapon during the last war with Iwa and Namikaze, I believe it was, had taken up your role as Hokage. So what are you doing back behind that stuffy old desk?" Sarutobi sighed. "Quit with the games, Kabatsu. I don't know how, but I'm sure you are aware of every detail of what has happened here, just as you were on that day 30 years ago. Yes, Minato Namikaze is dead, lost, sealing away the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The last of the clan that your renegades had joined is dead. So what possible interest you have in Konoha any longer I do not know." Sarutobi did not mention the child who had been given his mother's name to hide his lineage. Korra chuckled, grinning like a fox herself. "Oh Sarutobi, you and I both know that's not true. I was after all a Kagemusha of Nagareba Shigakur. I can smell the descendant of the Gazenka's clan as clear as day. But do not worry, Sarutobi. The four clans gave up any claim to the descendants of the Namikaze long ago when the binding contract was returned to us. The boy is safe, but there is still the remote possibility that there may come a day when he displays the powers of the Gazenkas. If that happens, we will have to insist that the powers be sealed away or he be brought to us for proper training so that he does not hurt himself or others. The Kisetsukas is not something to be taken lightly." Sarutobi was speechless for a moment, but before he could continue the doors to his office were pushed open and in marched an angry Rin pushing Kushina Uzumaki in a wheelchair, her new son nestled asleep in her arms. "Sarutobi. A squad of Chunin just attacked Kushina and her son, blaming him and the creature he carries for all that's happened. It is no longer safe here for them." Rin shut up as she noticed the mysterious woman standing before Sarutobi and the intense look she shot the young Uzumaki boy. Rin took up a defensive position. "You better think twice before attacking the kid, whoever you are. Any threat to his well-being will not be tolerated." Korra lazily returned her gaze to Sarutobi. Sarutobi could see that Korra's normally blue eyes had become slightly reptilian and red. She spoke, her voice reverberating slightly, deeper than before. "Well, it seems I'm not as all-knowing as you thought, Sarutobi. Why did Minato seal the greatest of the tailed ones into his own child? You know what? I don't want to know. I guess it's just the Gaki's fate, being a descendant of the Gazenkas as he is, that he should carry within him a demon lord, even if it is just the Kyuubi whelp." "What the hell are you blabbering about, Anna?" Rin exclaimed, her kunai at the ready. Korra turned a disdainful look on the kunoichi. "White brat. I am far older and more powerful than you. And I mean none of you harm." Her focus entered on the child briefly. "Sarutobi, it seems that our purpose here has changed." She returned her focus to Sarutobi, her eyes a deeper red. "The Gaki is descended from the Gazenkas and he now carries a demon within himself. If I had any doubt that the Kisetsukas would awaken in this child before, it's gone now. If he carries a demon, then its presence and influence guarantees that his legacy will awaken. Know this, Sarutobi, Sandaime Hokage of Konoha. The child this woman holds in her arms is precious in more ways than one and has been placed in a position that very few can appreciate. When the time comes, as I am sure it will, that the Kisetsukas awakens within him, members of the four clans will be waiting and watching to see whether he uses his abilities for good or for evil." Kabatsu Korra backed up to the window, smiling now as her eyes returned to their normal blue. "Sleep well, sweet Kazeko. May the gentle winds of fate guide you well and protect you from adversity." With a flash of flame from her feet, Korra was propelled out the window, doing a backflip as she traced a line of blood along her left forearm, grinning. "Kuchiyu's no jutsu. With a puff of smoke, a red and silver scaled dragon about 12 feet in length with a horned crown and flaring wings appeared outside the Hokage's window with Korra sitting grinning on its back. "See you later, old man." Korra and the dragon disappeared swiftly into the night sky, heading for parts unknown. Who the hell was that? Sarutobi flinched and turned to face the angry Kunoichi who had her kunai jammed into his desk. "An old friend from the days before I was the Hokage. Rin, if you and Kushina do not feel that it is safe for the child here, then what do you propose we do? It's simple really." Kushina said softly, finally looking up from her newborn baby, exhaustion in her eyes. Sarutobi and Rin both turned to look at her. "We'll stay at the Namikaze compound. Minato he keyed me into the security system before he." Kushina couldn't continue as she broke down crying, Rin swiftly moving to her side and holding her, whispering comfort to her. Sarutobi pondered this for a moment. "Well, I guess with the two of you to raise him and train him, it might work. He'll be a little cut off until his exams, but once he takes them and becomes a genin, no one in the village will be able to touch him without bringing down the entirety of my wrath." Sarutobi thought for another moment before nodding, his mind made up. "I've decided. As of this moment you, Rin, and you, Uzumaki Kushina are hereby on a long-term C-rank mission to train and protect Uzumaki Naruto, heir to the Namikaze, Uzumaki, and Gezenka's clans, as well as the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi no Kitsune. You will have an Anbu squad, handpicked by me, assigned to bring you supplies on a weekly basis, as well as to provide additional protection beyond the wards already in place. You will be given training material and supplies for Naruto, as well as some techniques copied from the Forbidden Scroll. From what I know of the Gezenkas, Naruto will be more than capable of mastering these techniques by the time he is ready to test for genin." Kushina looked up again. "What do you mean, Gezenka's clan? What did that woman mean about the Kisetsukas, whatever the hell that is?" Sarutobi took a deep breath and sighed. "The woman you met is from Nagareba Shigakur, a small hidden village far to the west, in a country in between the countries of wind and earth. They have a unique history, to say the least. And there will be plenty of time to explain the Kisetsukas to you, but for now we must get Kushina and the boy to safety." Sarutobi stood, shucking his robes and revealing himself to be wearing lightweight battle armor. "Now, follow me quickly, and we'll get you to the Namikaze compound before anyone can organize their hatred and turn it towards the boy. Sparrow, Inu. Show yourselves." Two Anbu, wearing a bird and a dog mask respectively, revealed themselves from the shadows. "You two guard our flanks. We'll use the tunnels beneath the city to exit unnoticed." But that Sarutobi lead the way out of his office, the two Anbu taking up flanking positions around Rin, Kushina, and the Yondame's legacy. 16 years later, 16-year-old Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze stood in front of the academy, taking a deep breath to get over his nerves before entering. He had been excited that he would be allowed to test for genin with other prospective ninja, but he was nervous as he had spent the past 16 years living outside the city, in his father's clan's old compound. He rarely entered Konoha with his mother Kushina or his guardian Rin, much less alone, his mother and guardian having decided long ago that it was unsafe and instead had taken him on trips to other villages to get him some outside interaction. But today, he was going to make them see. He was going to make them all see that he wasn't the bastard fox sealed within him. He was dressed in black pants and black boots, with a deep red jacket over a white shirt. His hair was tied back in a ponytail and was streaked with some red and black highlights, completely at odds with his brilliant blue eyes. Naruto grinned as a cute blonde girl raced past him, chasing a girl with bright pink hair, yelling something about Ino pig. Naruto chuckled when a tall boy with brown spiky pineapple hair muttered troublesome under his breath. "Yep, screw nervousness. This looks like it's going to be interesting." Nearby Kushina Uzumaki, Rin, and Mitarashi Anko, a jounin who had been assigned to assist in Naruto's last year of training, watched smiling as the boy they had raised from childhood, through all the difficulties therein, took his first steps into the world of being a true ninja. Kushina smiled as a dark-haired Hyuga girl stopped with her escort, her jaw dropped at the gorgeous blonde walking in front of her. Anko snorted as the bouncy boy who had hit on her on more than one occasion, winked at the Hyuga before entering the academy, missing the fountain of blood from her nose, propelling her onto the ground. "Well, the Gaki certainly has some talent with the ladies. I guess that's what we get for letting him roam during those visits to Aizu town." Anko was chuckling louder as she, Kushina, and Rin stood and shoo-shined away. Naruto stepped into the room he had been directed to, smiling widely as he recognized several figures inside. He gave Aburame Shino a curt nod, having met the insect nin and his parents a year before at a party at the Hokage's tower, and shared a high-five with Akamichi Chouji, who he had met at the same party. He had told both his secret and had been pleased that they hadn't judged him on what he carried inside himself. And he had been pleased to encounter another person who shared his appetite. "Yo Chouji, how's it been, man? Munch can't complain, Munch, glad you made it for the exams, Munch, Munch, hey, want to go get some barbecue to celebrate after the exams are over? Munch." Naruto chuckled as his friend munched away on his chips. Naruto could swear he had never seen the guy not eating. Absolutely Chowji. I'll need to stop by and see the old man first, but sure. Meet ya at Hikaru's at say 6. Munch, see ya then buddy, munch munch. Naruto grinned and walked up the steps past a perpetually bored-looking teen with pineapple spiky brown hair, the previously seen blonde and pink-haired girls fighting over a seat next to another bored-looking teenager with perpetual emo eyes, and a rough and tumble-looking boy with red markings on his face and a feisty pup on top of his head, who Naruto realized could only be an Inuzuka. Naruto passed several other rows of students before taking a seat at the back of the class. As he mentally rehearsed the jutsus he was going to perform for the practical portion of the test, the purple-haired Hyuga girl from before entered, her long hair swaying as she looked around the room. When she caught sight of him she blushed intensely, but otherwise managed to remain standing. Taking a deep breath, she strode up the stairs with determination, passing the Inuzuka who seemed confused by why she kept walking, and stopped by Naruto. Hello. Mind if I sit here? Naruto blinked and smiled up at the girl. Not at all, gorgeous. Sit wherever you like. The Hyuga blushed as she took the seat next to Naruto. I'm Hinata. Hyuga Hinata. Naruto smiled at her, taking in her eyes. Hello Hinata. I'm Naruto. Naruto noticed that the teacher was late. So, tell me, are the instructors here always late, or is it just ours? Hinata chuckled. No, they aren't usually late. Iruka-sensei is probably just making last-minute confirmations on test matters. Don't worry. I'm sure he'll be here soon. Naruto chuckled. I'm not worried, I'm just a little nervous about the exams. If you hadn't noticed, I haven't exactly been to any classes. I was taught by my mom and my guardian since I was born. Oh? Why wouldn't you have been allowed to attend classes with the rest of us? Naruto was saved from having to answer that question when the door to the room slid open and a scarred chunin with brown spiky pineapple hair entered, followed by a second chunin with blue hair. Okay everybody, quiet down. The two fighting girls ignored Iruka-sensei. Iruka performed a few quick hand seals and suddenly his head was enlarged. I said quiet. Both girls slammed down into their seats, suddenly meek and quiet. That's better. Now, as I was trying to say, we have a new student with us, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. As Iruka continued, faces all around the class turned to look at Naruto, some with confusion, others with glimmers of understanding as they heard his last name. For reasons that I cannot disclose, Naruto here has been being trained by his mother, a jounin of Konoha, as well as several other jounin, selected by the Hokage himself to train him. He is here to take the genin exam with you all, and should he pass, 2 of you may find yourself on his team. Iruka shuffled a few papers. One emo team with ducked hair glared at Naruto, wondering why this new punk was important enough to rate special training by jounin instead of attending classes. Now, the first part of the exam will be a written exam. This will be followed by an obstacle course, accuracy exam, taijutsu exam, and an ninjutsu exam. Those of you who pass will be given your instructions at the end of the day. Now, as Mizuki passes out the exams, I want you all to remember that if you don't know something, don't let yourself get overwhelmed by nerves. Just skip it and answer the next one. As Mizuki began to pass out the exam, Naruto chuckled. A written exam? This is going to be a piece of cake. Next to him, Hinata couldn't help but smile at her neighbor's chuckle and eager grin as a thought passed through her mind. I wonder if he has a girlfriend. As Iruka and Mizuki moved throughout the room collecting the exams at the end of the test, Naruto stretched. He was so used to sitting in a tree or spread out on the grass of the Namikaze compound while studying that spending 3 hours sitting in place in a chair had been torture for him. A deep rumbling chuckle in the back of his mind told him his partner in pranks was amused by his host's discomfort. Hey, you try sitting in one place for 3 hours after 16 years of running around. I have kid, or have you forgotten that I'm stuck inside you? Naruto chuckled, earning him a puzzled look from Hinata. He just winked at her. Of course not, Baka Kitsune. But you at least get to move around a bit. I've been sitting literally in one place. On a very uncomfortable chair I might add. Ah. Whatever kit. Besides, from what that pineapple-haired teacher said, the rest of the exam is all practical. That should be right up your alley. Naruto suppressed a snicker as he wondered what his new classmates would think when they saw him during the rest of the exam. Naruto-kun, why do you have that look on your face? Naruto blinked and looked at Hinata, confusion on his face. You looked like you were a cat playing with a mouse. Naruto's face remained blank for a few moments before he chuckled. Oh. Haha. It's nothing. I was just contemplating which technique I'm going to demonstrate for the ninjutsu portion of the practical, that's all. Naruto chuckled a little more, scratching the back of his head with one hand. Hinata just shook her head, blushing imperceptibly. This new boy Naruto was confusing her all up. She decided that she found him a pleasant enigma. Now, quiet down everyone. We've got all your exam papers, so Mizuki will take them to be graded while I lead you out to the obstacle course for the second part of the exam. Most of the chattering around the room settled down as soon as Iruka began talking, but Naruto took stock of those whose attention was elsewhere. He noticed that the pink-haired and blonde-haired kunoichi that had passed him on his way into the building were still glaring at one another, and he noticed that the duckbit-haired emo team they had been fighting over was glaring at him. Naruto decided he'd better keep his guard up around him. The Kyuubi agreed. "Now, if you'll all gather your stuff and follow me, I'll show you to the obstacle course you will be competing on." With that, Iruka gathered a few papers and headed for the exit from the room. As Naruto pushed back his chair and stood up stretching, he watched out the corner of his eye and could see that the emo team flashed him a glare before he turned and walked out the room, a posse of kunoichi squeeing and following him out. When the dust cleared, Naruto found that Hinata was the only girl left in the room. Well, I'm impressed." "What?" Hinata asked, confused. Naruto chuckled and faced her as he turned to head down the stairs and out of the room. "With you. Unlike every other kunoichi in this class, you seem to be more interested in the exam than some emo team with a duckbit hairstyle." Hinata blanched, turning white as Kiba, who had walked over to join them, chuckled and patted Naruto on the shoulder. "What's his deal anyway? He kept glaring at me through the entire exam." Kiba chuckled as the three headed down the stairs, following Choji out of the classroom. "You mean Sasuke-Uchiha? His older brother killed his entire clan, slew his parents, but left him alive so he could be tormented by the knowledge." Kiba snorted loudly. "But frankly, his tirades about gaining power to defeat his brother have grown tiresome. Any respectable student here just ignores him unless we don't have a choice. He doesn't socialize, and even with that huge mass of girls that follows him everywhere, he hasn't shown the slightest interest in any female. I swear, if it weren't for the fact that he hasn't shown any interest in any guy either, I'd almost think the emo team was gay. Instead, I just think he's an idiot." The puppy on his head barked. Yeah, Akamaru, I think you're right. I bet his brother probably." "Kiba. How could you say something like that about a fellow student?" Hinata interjected, her complexion recovered. Kiba blinked at the wide eyes suddenly staring him down. Before anyone had a chance to continue, Iruka stuck his head around a corner and yelled for the three to hurry up. As the three hurried down the corridor, Naruto turned to his new companion. "So your name's Kiba, huh? I think I met a relative of yours last year. Her name was Hana, I think." Kiba grinned back and Akamaru woofed happily from atop his head. Yeah, she's my older sister. She mentioned meeting you as well. Something about you having good taste in women's underclothes, I think she said." Thud. Both boys stopped and looked behind them to see Hinata passed out on the floor of the hallway, blood dribbling from her nose. Konoha Ninja Academy Obstacle Course. Naruto waited with the other prospective genin as each in turn ran the obstacle course. Some showings were impressive. As much as he hated to admit it, the emo team had done quite a good job of it. Others, not so much. The pink-haired girl from earlier slipped on one of the swinging ropes and landed in a puddle of water, and the blonde got tangled in a rope net for a while before she managed to extricate herself and finish the course. When it was finally his turn, he crouched at the entrance to the course like some sprinters he had watched compete in one of the cities in the land of water during a trip. He had spoken with a few and they had given him some pointers on starting off during races. "Just remember, kid, don't show anything you don't want possible enemies to know about. We both know how dangerous this city can be for you, and I don't particularly feel like being returned to the summon realm in spirit chains, kid. Yeah, don't get your panties in a twist. I'll stick to simple acrobatics, none of the fancy stuff Anko and mom taught me." Kyuubi just chuckled in his head. When Iruka called start, Naruto launched forward with a burst of speed, bounding down the obstacle course. He quickly sprinted through it, dodging obstacles with a fluid ease and grace, scrambling past others with vulpine speed and grace, not that many of those watching would understand. When he reached the finish line, he grinned brightly as Iruka announced he had made the fastest time so far. Again he noticed the emo team Sasuke glaring at him, and Naruto stuck his tongue out at him before leaping down from the finished platform. "Oh man, Naruto, that was wicked. Where'd you learn to move like that? It reminded me of a fox my sister showed me once while we were outside the city on a family trip." Hinata, standing nearby, noticed Naruto's sudden nervousness and filed it away for future investigation. As she approached the two boys, she saw Naruto pet Akamaru and saw the little pup bark happily. She smiled, remembering the first time she had met the little dog too. Flashback. "Hey everybody, guess what?" The 15-year-old Kiba burst into the classroom, drawing annoyed looks from a few of the inhabitants, including Ino Yamanaka and Sakura Haruno, who were in the middle of one of their frequent heated debates over who would win Sasuke. Kiba proudly held up his arms, revealing the inquisitive white puppy in them. "Akamaru is finally old enough for me to take him with me. Isn't that awesome?" Shikamaru Nara muttered. "Troublesome." Tauji smiled as he munched on his customary 12 bags of chips. Hinata stood up and walked over to pet the new puppy, who eagerly sniffed and licked at her hand. Hinata giggled. "You're so lucky your family is so close to their animals, Kiba. My father won't even let me keep a hamster. He feels that keeping animals as pets or companions is beneath us Hyuga. Sometimes I wish I could just shut him up for once and leave. Hinata eeped and turned white as she realized what she had just said. Kiba chuckled. Well, that's a first from you, Hinata. Glad to see you are finally gaining some confidence in yourself. Hinata's color returned as she smiled. Yeah, well, some stuff happened recently at home that made me finally realize I'm not worthless, not that any of my relatives can't see otherwise. So I guess I'll just have to make myself the best ninja I can be. Hinata snickered at the bickering girls as she returned to her seat. Then flashback. Hinata. Hey Hinata, you okay? Hinata blinked as she found herself face to face with Naruto. Wah. Hinata stumbled backward as Naruto and Kiba bent over laughing, slapping each other's backs. Man, Kiba, Hinata-chan must have been zoned out something bad. Hinata blinked before getting an annoyed look on her face and stomping towards the two laughing boys. That wasn't funny. Naruto and Kiba laughed as they ran away from the angry Kunoichi chasing after them. Iruka just watched and shook his head. Mizuki however was watching the three with a thoughtful look on his face. Konoha Ninja Academy target practice field. An hour later all the students were lined up at the practice field as Iruka explained the rules of the third part of the exam. Okay, now listen up. The next part of the exam is the accuracy exam. You will each be given 3 kunai, 3 shurikens, and 3 senbon. You will attack the target, aiming for the 3 critical points. Your goal is to be as accurate as possible with your strikes, striking each point with a kunai, shuriken, and a senbon. With that said, Ino Yamanaka, you're up first. Hinata, Naruto, and Kiba stood near the back of the line and watched as Ino stepped up to the line and paused for a second. Suddenly she shifted position, her hands moving rapidly. Looking at the target, all watching could see that she had hit almost perfectly, only one senbon off slightly. Ino smirked at Sakura. Try to beat that forehead. Ino walked out of the way as the next student stepped up and Mizuki reset the target. As each student stepped up and turned to take their shot, Kiba and Naruto chatted. So you mean to tell me you actually dared to paint the Hokage monument? Man, Kiba, you've got balls. Kiba laughed. Well, when you're raised by 2 women, you end up needing to do something to get outside attention. Even if it's the wrong sort. Naruto laughed. You don't know the half of it. I may not have painted Baka on the Sandame's forehead, but I've certainly performed my share of pranks. Just ask my mom about it and she'll probably tell you about the time I replaced all the toilet paper in the Namika's compound with her collection of ninjutsu scrolls. Hinata just shook her head smiling. She had become good friends with Kiba over the past year and she was pleased to see that this new guy was getting along so well with him. Especially since he's so damn cute. Hinata blushed as Naruto stepped up to the line, taking hold of the proffered weapons. Then, without seeming to move, he launched the weapons at his target. When everyone finished blinking they realized he had hit every spot perfectly. Sasuke glared at him, as did Sakura. Hinata smiled at his continued good showing as Kiba stepped up for his turn and noticed that Ino was now looking at Naruto with a look of confusion. Naruto, catching her look, chuckled. What is it, Ino-chan? Did you think the reason I haven't been in normal classes meant I was remedial or something? He chuckled again as Kiba joined him. Hinata missed what was said next as she focused on throwing her own weapons, but when she turned back Ino was watching stunned as Naruto and Kiba walked off laughing. Huh? I've never seen that particular look on Ino's face before. I wonder what they said to confuse her so. Hinata chuckled to herself as she passed the stunned Kunoichi on her way to follow Kiba and Naruto, who had begun following Iruka towards the practice ring for the 4th part of the exam. Konoha Ninja Academy Taijutsu practice field. Once everyone was gathered in the practice field, Iruka split everyone into 2 groups. When the students wouldn't quit yapping to each other about how they had done on the previous 2 portions of the exam, he performed a few quick hand seals. Everyone quiet down and listen. Naruto and Kiba both rubbed at their ears as Iruka's jutsu was dispelled, returning his head and voice to normal. Now, as I was trying to say, the 4th part of the exam will involve a one-on-one taijutsu fight between each of you and Mizuki. The matches will be 3 minutes each. You may use any taijutsu style or techniques that you know. Kiba and Yuzuka, you're up first. Kiba grinned at his companions. Well, wish me luck. Mizuki may not be the coolest instructor, but I've seen him practice spar with Iruka and he knows his stuff. Kiba turned back to the ring as he and Akamaru entered. Crouching, he awaited Iruka's command to begin. When it came he lunged forward to assault Mizuki with his family's trademark style. Naruto turned to Hinata as Kiba and Mizuki went at it. So, Kiba tells me that you have some of the best taijutsu of the entire class. Hinata blushed and smiled faintly. Kiba really said that? Well, my family's personal style, Jiken, disables the opponent's Tenketsu. For years, actually, I felt I was a failure because I was apparently too nice. But, about a year ago something happened that changed my mind. See, the Hyuga clan is split into 2 groups, the main family and the branch family. My cousin Niji was born to the branch family, but he taught himself the powerful techniques normally taught only to the main family. My father, who never seemed to be proud of me, berated me for allowing a branch member to surpass me before taking Niji under his wing for special instruction. He decreed that I was no longer his heir and began training my younger sister in my place. I'm not sure why, but that jolted me out of my self-doubt. I took a look at my life and at life outside the Hyuga compound and realized that my kindness is only a weakness if I let it interfere with my duties as a ninja, and I realized that I'm not worthless like my father said. So I decided that I would change myself and become the best I could be. A year later, well, I don't even care anymore if my father is proud of me or not. When I grow up I intend to denounce my clan name. Naruto stared at Hinata, at the determination on her face. Somewhere in the back of his mind a voice spoke up. Damn kid, this girl has fire. Not like those silly civilian girls at that concert last month. I'd keep an eye on her kid. Whatever Baka Kitsune. But Naruto silently agreed with the fox. Hinata was something else. He smiled and held out his hand to her. Well Hinata, that's an admirable goal. I'll be cheering you on. Naruto winked at her and was rewarded by Hinata blushing. Get off me Mizuki. Naruto and Hinata both turned back to the ring to see one of their classmates pinned by Mizuki. 12 seconds Ichigo, not very impressive at all. I hate to say it, but you'll probably need to spend another year at the academy. Ichigo grumbled as he stood up and walked off muttering to himself. Okay, next up is Sasuke. Sasuke humphed and stepped into the ring, taking a basic fighting stance. When Iruka called start he remained in place, waiting for Mizuki to make the first move. Mizuki stepped forward and struck, starting a back and forth match between him and Sasuke. Naruto grinned, admitting to himself that the emo team had some skill. Sasuke lasted the entire 3 minutes, only taking 1 or 2 good hits from Mizuki. As he walked out of the ring he smirked at Naruto with an arrogant grin as he was surrounded by a crowd of raving fangirls. Hinata was surprised to note that Ino wasn't among them. When she looked around she found her standing on the other side of the ring talking to Choji. Huh? I'd have normally expected her to be fighting Sakura or fawning over Sasuke, so what's she doing talking to Choji? Naruto. You're up next. Hinata blinked and turned to see her new friend step into the ring with Mizuki. Grinning Naruto took a stance that had imbalanced back, his hands held open and in a defensive posture. Begin. Without waiting for Mizuki to strike first Naruto slid his stance forward, launching a 1-2 punch at Mizuki's head before ducking under a kick from him and rolling away. As Naruto twisted and launched at Mizuki again he noticed Sakura start haranguing Ino out of the corner of his eye, and next thing he knew Mizuki had Sunshine behind him and pinned him. Unfortunately Iruka hadn't been watching, and Naruto realized that Mizuki had noticed this as well as he shifted his pin to an academy-taught hold before Iruka returned his attention to Naruto. Oh. Iruka looked down at his timer. 15 seconds. Not very impressive. I expected more out of you Naruto. Naruto grumbled as he stood up and walked towards Kiba and Hinata, dusting himself off. Hinata, you're up next. Hinata gave Naruto a sympathetic look as she walked past him towards the ring. Ouch man, that sucks. Mizuki totally cheated back there, but Iruka wasn't watching. Why didn't you say anything? Naruto looked up from dusting himself off to look Kiba in the eye. After a second he spoke quietly. Kiba, there is something about me that most people in the village hate me for, but if anyone but I mention it to anyone not already aware of it, they will be exiled, at best. When I came to take this exam I was aware that there might be those who would attempt to hinder my exam. Kiba went still, shocked that anyone would want to hinder his new friend from passing his exams. I've already dealt quietly with dispelling a Jinjutsu on my examination paper, as well as someone's covert use of a Suiton Jutsu to make parts of the obstacle course slippery when I took it. Kiba gasped, even more shocked that someone would do that. But, the only people here are students. Well, and Iruka and Mizuki. Naruto looked to be deep in concentration as he led Kiba away from the ring towards a bench alongside the building. I know, and I don't know if this is Mizuki acting alone or whether both of them are in on it. But either way, I'm dealing with it as it comes. And I'd appreciate if you not say anything to Hinata. She put up a good front, but I think she still has a few lingering issues and I don't want her worrying about this problem and screwing the last part of her own exam because of it. Kiba appraised his friend with a newfound respect. Man Naruto, and here I thought you were just giving up. Okay, I won't tell Hinata. But she's a great girl and doesn't deserve to be lied to by her friends. Kiba put emphasis on the word friends. So I want you to promise me that you will tell her yourself after the exam. Naruto looked at Kiba as they sat down. After a moment he looked back towards the practice ring where Hinata was holding her own against Mizuki. Okay Kiba, you win. I'll tell her, but only after we've officially passed the exams. I don't want her jeopardizing her exam for my sake. Kiba nodded assent to this as Iruka called time and Hinata left the ring, flushed but energetic. Mizuki's left arm seemed to be dangling. Hey guys, did you see that? Hinata ran over to them. Naruto grinned at the excited Kunoichi. Yeah we did Hinata. You did great. I'm really impressed. Kiba looked at Naruto for a sec, impressed at how quickly he could put the mask back up. He realized Hinata was looking at him and hastily added his 2 cents. Hell yeah Hinata, you did great. And is it just me or did you manage to shut down Mizuki's arm? Hinata chuckled. Yeah. I guess he felt he needed to take things easy on me since I'm a woman. Well, I showed him not to underestimate us women. Hinata struck a pose and Naruto and Kiba both fell off the bench laughing, Akamaru barking in annoyance as he fell off Kiba's head. Hinata looked at them blankly for a moment before falling over laughing herself. They were so busy laughing they almost missed Iruka calling everyone to return to the classroom for the final phase of the exam. Konoha Ninja Academy Classroom A. Everyone filed back into the classroom chatting excitedly. Naruto kept his attention half on Kiba's explanation of a technique his sister was going to teach him that would let him and Akamaru share abilities with one another and half on the rest of his classmates, gauging their behavior. He saw the boy named Ichigo take a seat dejectedly at the front of the class, next to a short black-haired girl and a grumpy-looking redhead. He saw Shikamaru take his customary seat next to Chaoji, and Naruto smiled as he saw his friend was enjoying a bag of barbec-flavored chips that he had introduced Naruto to a few months ago. He saw several girls fighting over seats near Sasuke, and he saw Sasuke look at him and smirk. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Okay, everyone settle down. Naruto, Kiba, and Hinata took their seats at the back of the room. Now, for the final part of the exam. Each of you will enter the next room one at a time and perform a bunshin and a henge. You will be scored on each. Ichigo, you're first. Naruto saw the orange-haired Ichigo stand and walk muttering into the next room following Iruka and Mizuki. Hey Naruto. Kiba nudged Naruto. Yeah? Your teachers did teach you to perform a proper bunshin and henge, right? I mean, did they even have time, what with all that special instruction they were giving you? Kiba ducked as Naruto tried to grab him and give him a noogie. Hinata almost tried to stop them, but then shook her head, giving it up as a lost cause. As she turned her gaze to look around the room she saw that Ino was looking at Naruto again, a look of contemplation on her face. Hinata, I wish to speak with you for a moment, privately. Hinata turned to find Shino standing next to her desk, his hands tucked in his coat as usual. Oh, sure Shino, no problem. Hinata glanced back at where Naruto and Kiba were wrestling on the ground with Akamaru watching and barking at them encouragingly as she stood up. When they had moved sufficiently far away Shino spoke again. Naruto has earned my respect Hinata, and I would not see him done a disservice. Over the course of this exam I have noticed covert attempts to disrupt his exam. I am sure that Naruto himself is aware of these attempts, but for some reason he has chosen not to speak up and say anything. I suspect I know the reason why. I would like to ask that you use your Byakugan when Naruto goes to do the final part of his exam and watch for anything untoward occurring. Hinata blinked, as this was the most she had ever heard Shino say without being prompted to recite a passage during class. Then what he was saying sunk in. Wait, you think one of our instructors is trying to make Naruto fail his exam? Shino merely nodded his head. But why would anyone want to do that? Shino looked uneasy, something Hinata rarely saw him as. I am not at liberty to say, Hinata. HMPH. Hinata crossed her arms. Fine, I'll trust you Shino, as you have never lied to me. Just make sure you are sitting near me when Naruto goes into the next room. Shino nodded his assent. Shino, you're up. Both students turned to see Iruka poking his head through the door as Shikamaru slouched through muttering troublesome. Hinata shared a look with Shino before he turned and silently headed down the stairs towards the front of the class. Once he and Iruka had left the room Hinata returned to her seat, where Kiba and Naruto had finally collapsed laughing on the floor, with Akamaru jumping from one to the other barking playfully. Things continued in the same manner until Ino returned from her exam. When Iruka poked his head into the room he called Naruto's name. As the laughing blonde stood and leapt down the stairs, Hinata noticed that Ino seemed slightly off. Just before Ino slapped Sakura and started yelling at her. Forehead. What the hell did you do that for Ino pig? It quickly devolved into a full-on fight. Iruka saw this and sighed. Naruto, head down the hall to classroom B. Mizuki will oversee your exam. I need to break these two up. Iruka walked over and tried to break the two fighting Kunoichi up. Hinata and Shino shared a look and Kiba, seeing this, looked from one to the other and back again. Hinata. What's with that look? Hinata ignored him as Shino came over. She was too busy focusing on the wall into classroom 2. Byakugan. Konoha Ninja Academy Classroom B. Mizuki was shuffling some papers as Naruto entered the room. Hello Naruto. Hello instructor. Mizuki looked at the door pointedly. Where's Iruka? He was supposed to bring you. Naruto chuckled nervously and scratched the back of his head. Ino and that Haruno chick started brawling. He said you'd administer my exam. Naruto failed to notice Mizuki's smile as he looked down and shuffled the papers once more. Okay then. Well Naruto, let's have you make a bunshin first. Naruto stood straight up and brought his hands together, performing a series of quick hand seals. Page bunshin no jutsu. Mizuki blinked as the room was filled wall to wall with grinning copies of Naruto. Impressive. But half of Naruto's blinked slightly confused. The others were busy wrestling. A few even went poof when they got hit too hard. I asked you to perform a bunshin. Well, cage bunshin is technically a more advanced technique, you did not perform the requested technique. Mizuki made a few marks on Naruto's sheet before looking back up. Naruto, recognizing that Mizuki was doing whatever he could to hinder his exam and deciding that openly confronting him about it wouldn't be smart, had an idea. Oh kid, I think that's a good punishment for the team. Just be careful your mother and Rin don't find out or they'll skin you alive. Now, perform a henge jutsu Naruto. I want you to turn into a copy of me. Yeah right, you team. Like I'd want to be anything like you. Naruto and every clone in the room brought their hands together and performed a quick series of hand seals. When they finished, a chorus of henge filled the room along with a cloud of smoke. The smoke cleared to reveal a room filled with naked women, wisps of smoke carefully concealing certain parts of their bodies. Some had blonde hair, some had red hair, and some had black hair. And all winked and blew kisses sexily at Mizuki. Mizuki's attempt to remain conscious lasted precisely 3.8 seconds before a gout of blood shot from his nose, knocking him backwards in his chair and causing him to hit his head on the blackboard. Serves the damn team right. By the time Iruka returned and found him regaining consciousness, the mass of Narutos had already left the room. Konoha Ninja Academy classroom A. Naruto re-entered the classroom to find Iruka finally having settled the two girls down. Ino looked like she had a headache and Hinata. Whoa. What's with that look on Hinata's face? And what's with those cold looks from Kiba and Shioshid? Kiba must have told him. But why is Hinata's nose dripping blood? Naruto swiftly made his way up the stairs past Iruka, who turned to head back to the exam room, calling for Sasuke to follow him. Naruto, Kiba, and Shino all stood quietly, cold looks on their faces. After a few seconds, Hinata was the one to break the silence. Naruto. Naruto looked down at the blushing Kunoichi. Where exactly did you learn that technique you performed? That was more than just a simple illusion. Naruto finally understood why she was blushing. Oh well, you see, where you learned that technique is not relevant at the present moment, Naruto. Naruto turned his gaze to Shino as he interrupted. What matters is that at least one instructor, possibly both, has attempted to lower your exam scores on multiple occasions and you have done nothing about it. If you would accept it, Kiba, Hinata and myself will contact the Hokage and attest to this fact. Naruto remained quiet for a moment, appraising Shino. Finally he spoke. No Shino, don't. As long as I pass the exam, which I am sure I will, there will be no need for that. You and I both knew that this was a possibility from the moment I decided to come today to take the exams. And you well know that I will likely have to deal with worse now that I will be in Konoha on a regular basis. I can't always go running to the old man when I have a problem. I'm assuming Hinata informed you of precisely what techniques I performed in there. Shino nodded and Kiba grinned fiercely, confirming Naruto's suspicions. Well, that was just the tip of the iceberg. I am under orders to keep the majority of my skills secret for now. Only my teammates will learn any more than I have shown here, at least for the time being. And even then there are skills that I by necessity must keep secret even from them, whoever they may be. I will not reveal them unless I am absolutely certain I can trust my teammates not to freak out. Oh no, Naruto. What do you mean freak out? All three boys turned to face Hinata. It's nothing, Hinata. It's not that I don't consider you as a friend already, but rather that given the way the majority of the people who know this secret think about me, that I do not impart its knowledge lightly. Shino knows, as does Choji Akimichi, but they have both proven to be trustworthy and non-judgmental people. Perhaps one day I'll be able to trust you with this knowledge as well. Naruto grinned and looked at Kiba, who had Akamaru on top of his head again. And yes, Inuzuka, I'm sure I'll be able to trust you with it eventually too. Kiba laughed and slapped Naruto on the back. No pressure, Naruto. Just tell me one thing. Does my sister know? Naruto paused for a second. Yes. And not because I told her. She is old enough that she already knew. Both Hinata and Kiba puzzled at what sort of secret about Naruto could be known by people of a certain age, but not those younger. Naruto suddenly smiled and perked up. Anyways, cheer up. We are almost done with our exams, and by this time next week we will all be genin of Konohagakure. Little as that means. Oh shut up, Baka Kitsune. It's a means to an end and you know it. Naruto could swear he heard the fox grinning in the back of his mind. 1 hour later, both Iruka and Mizuki finally returned, flanking the Hokage. As she made her way back to her seat by Kiba and Naruto, Iruka and Mizuki shuffled a few papers into a folder and then turned to face the class. You have all performed admirably and are a real honor to our village. While some of you need another year or two before we can put you in harm's way, your failure of the exam should in no way dishearten you. The rest of you will be returning here in the morning for your team assignments. The Hokage took a puff on his pipe before continuing. Iruka, if you would please read the list of those who passed. Iruka chuckled and stepped forward with a scroll in his hands and began reading off the list of names. Abarirenji, passed. Shino Abiram, passed. Akamichi Chouji, passed. Hinata saw that Naruto and Kiba had their fingers crossed in anticipation. She was so distracted she almost missed when Iruka called her name. Before it fully sank in, she was being hugged by Naruto and Kiba, who were congratulating her on passing. And Yuzuka Kiba, yada. Ahem. Would you please keep it down to a muted roar, Kiba? I am trying to read of the list of students who passed. Kiba sheepishly sank back into his seat as Iruka continued. Ichiki Rukia, passed. Kurosaki Ichigo, passed. Naruto smiled as the orange-haired guy who'd gone down even faster than him during the Taijutsu exam stood triumphantly on his desk. Before an eraser tossed by Iruka knocked him backwards to the floor, his two companions staring down at his twitching form. See guys, if he could pass, then I don't have a problem. Hinata smiled and Kiba chuckled. Akamaru barked happily. When Uchiha Sasuke was announced, Naruto noticed that Sasuke was grinning triumphantly his direction. When Uzumaki Naruto was announced, Naruto noticed that Sasuke's grin turned into a frown. Naruto just grinned back at him for a moment before turning to shake Hinata's proffered hand. And finally, Yamanaka Ino passed. Iruka rolled up the scroll and stepped back. The Hokage took a few puffs on his pipe before speaking. Congratulations to all you who passed. Tonight you get to celebrate with your family. I'm sure that they are all outside anxiously waiting to hear if you passed. Tomorrow, I want all of you who passed to return here at 8 AM sharp tomorrow morning for your team assignments. Until then, enjoy your celebrating, for you are now Genin of Konohagakure. A few of the newly promoted Genin cheered loudly as the Hokage left the room, followed by a few dejected students who would need to spend another year at the academy, and Iruka and Mizuki began to pass out hit I-8. Munch, hey Naruto. Don't forget. Hikaru's at 6. Munch. Naruto saw Chouji was proudly wearing his new hit I-8. Definitely Chouji. Naruto waved at him before taking the proffered headband from Iruka as he stepped up to the final row. Naruto grinned. Thanks, Iruka-sensei. Even though you didn't do a damn thing to stop Mizuki from attempting to sabotage my exam. Makes me wonder if you were honestly oblivious or if you were in cahoots. Hinata and Kiba both gasped at Naruto's blunt statement. Iruka looked taken aback for a moment before frowning. And what makes you think Mizuki was attempting to sabotage your exam, Naruto? Kiba and Hinata jumped in before Naruto could speak, both yelling about the different things that Mizuki had done. It took Iruka a minute to quiet them both, during which time Naruto merely kept a watchful eye on Mizuki and a solid stare at Iruka. Now, Naruto, as I asked, what makes you think Mizuki was attempting to sabotage your exam, Naruto? It's simple, sensei. First, he was the one who handed me my exam during the first part of the exam, which I detected was under a Jinjutsu, which I dispelled. Hinata and Kiba both looked shocked that Naruto had been able to dispel a Jinjutsu unnoticed. Second, during the obstacle course someone used some form of Suiton Jutsu to make sections of the obstacle course extremely slippery for me during it. Third, during the Taijutsu exam, when you looked away to deal with Ino and Sakura, Mizuki Shunshined to get behind me and put me in a body hold. While I could probably have broken free, I did not expect him to cheat, nor did I wish to injure a fellow Konoha shinobi during a friendly match. Iruka looked appalled at the thought that what Naruto said could be true. And finally, Ino was ignoring Sakura ever since the accuracy portion of the exam. Yet when she comes back from her ninjutsu practical, she appeared to be in a daze and attacked Sakura for no apparent reason, forcing you to try to break them up. Coincidentally, this occurred just as I was called for my exam. When I performed Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, a considerably more advanced technique than a simple Bunshin, Mizuki marked me down as failing to perform Bunshin no Jutsu. And I'm sure my henge score has me marked as doing poorly, but I was so fed up with the bastard's attempts that I used a cage killer of a technique to knock him out so I could return to my friends. Iruka balked when Naruto casually tossed about knowing Kage Bunshin, a technique he knew to be forbidden. So you're the reason I found Mizuki passed out with blood dripping from his face. Yup. Guess the perverted bastard couldn't handle my technique. Kiba chuckled and Hinata blushed. Naruto, these are serious accusations. If you aren't telling the truth you could be sent to prison. I'm telling the complete truth. Naruto said seriously. Whether you decide to act upon what I've told you is up to you. Now, good day sensei. I need to hurry if I'm going to meet up with my mom. Naruto nodded respectfully before dodging around Iruka and hopping out the window. After pausing for a moment, both Hinata and Kiba bowed as well, grabbing their hit I-8 as they ran past and leapt out the window to follow Naruto, Kiba barking wildly. Iruka chuckled at their exuberance as he turned to head down the stairs, but the sight of Mizuki leaving the classroom drove what Naruto had just told him back into the front of his mind. Mizuki. I swear, if I find any evidence that indicates that what Naruto has told me is true, I'll flay you alive myself. Iruka headed down the steps himself to go clean up the blood left in the exam room by Mizuki's nosebleed. Outside Konoha Ninja Academy, Naruto landed with a thud outside the academy building, followed shortly by his new friends Kiba and Hinata. Hinata looked at him with a mixture of shock and admiration on her face. Kiba grinned like a madman as he slapped Naruto on the back. "Man, I can't believe you just did that. I mean, the look on Haruka's face was totally worth not calling Mizuki on his bull crap." Kiba. Hinata was shocked that her friend would be pleased at Haruka's surprise and confusion. On second thought, maybe it's not so surprising after all. "What? You know it's true. Haruka always seems to have a stick up his butt." Kiba let out a yowl as Hinata smacked him in the back of the head. "That's because you are always pulling pranks, Kiba." Naruto chuckled as Hinata smacked Kiba again, and Kiba attempted to fend her off. He was about to speak when a shout rang out from behind him, from the direction of the entrance to the academy. "Naruto. There you are. Your mom and I have been looking everywhere for you." Naruto face-palmed as Rin came up behind him, attacking with a big hug and a huge grin on her face. "So I'm guessing from this Konoha headband you're holding that you passed, right?" Naruto grinned and turned to give Rin a hug back before taking a step back towards his friends. "Yup, with mostly flying colors. I'll explain the mostly at dinner." Rin just grinned at Naruto for a moment before looking past him and taking notice of his now stunned companions. Hinata was blushing because Rin was a gorgeous woman and had been hugging her new crush quite close. Kiba, blood dripping from his nose, noticed that Rin's white and red bodysuit was quite form-fitting. But Naruto didn't say anything. After a moment Rin grinned and spoke up again. "So Naruto, aren't you going to introduce me to your new friends?" Rin's grin widened as Naruto blushed, realizing his forgetfulness. Auntie Rin, these are Inuzuka Kiba and Hyuga Hinata. They've made me feel really welcome, so please, don't embarrass me in front of them." Akamaru woofed from atop Kiba's head and Hinata continued to blush. Rin spoke again as she turned to lead the way back to the front of the academy. "Oh, don't worry Naruto. I'd never do that to you. That's Anko's job." Naruto stopped dead in his tracks as Kiba and Hinata both followed Rin. "And Anko's here? With mom? To see me graduate?" Rin looked back over her shoulder as she continued to walk, Hinata looking back and forth between her and Naruto. "Oh yes Naruto. And she is very excited to see you wearing your new Konoha headband." Rin shook her head as she faced forward again. "I swear, if she wasn't already slated for a special project of the Hokages she'd be requesting to be your Jounin instructor." Naruto turned even wider. As much as he respected the dark-haired Kunoichi's skill as a ninja, the thought of spending all day, every day, with her frankly scared the crap out of him. Something just wasn't right with that woman. Naruto was brought back to reality by Kiba's cry of "Hey, hurry up Naruto." Shaking his head to clear it he realized his friends were rounding the corner and he took off at a sprint to catch up. By the time he caught up with them they had already reached the milling group of grinning new genin and their proud parents and siblings. He chuckled as he saw Kiba tackled by a wild-looking woman with red markings on her face, while a more refined-looking Inuzuka woman in an entirely white coat watched on smiling. Naruto easily recognized Hana Inuzuka, Kiba's sister. She caught sight of him and waved before being ambushed by a hug from her younger brother and a big lick from Akamaru. Before Naruto could notice anything else he was ambushed by an attack from a beautiful redhead in blue and red pants and a blouse. Mom. You're crushing me." Naruto gasped for breath as his mom released a hug, smiling down at him. His relief was short-lived as he heard a voice behind him say "Hello Gaki" before he was ambushed from behind by another hug. Anko the snake Jounin had struck. "Brah. Get off me Anko. It's creepy when you hug me while wearing that." Hinata blushed seeing Anko's outfit. Anko was dressed in a short skirt and a long trench coat, wearing practically nothing but a sheer fishnet bodysuit underneath it. She silently prayed that her nose wouldn't start bleeding again. Anko finally released Naruto, chuckling along with his mom and aunt as he spun away from her, wiping it himself as if dusting himself off. "So Naruto, let's see it." Naruto looked up at his mom, only to be greeted by the sight of 3 grinning Kunoichi and one extremely blushing one who was trying not to look at Anko's torso region. Finally realizing what they meant he reached into his pocket and pulled out his hit I-8, pulling it to his forehead and tying it behind his head, grinning proudly as he did so. As he did this Hinata noticed a number of the adults around them looking at Naruto out of the corner of their eye with disgusted looks and caught several whispers, including comments like "Is that th and quiet? You know we can't talk about that." Hinata filed it away for future analysis and investigation as she turned her attention back to Naruto. Naruto continued smiling as Rin and Anko tossed off comments about how cool he looked now that he was Konoha shinobi and his mom smiled proudly at him, trying not to cry as Naruto reminded her so much of his father at this moment. Hinata watched all the happiness and pride they had in Naruto and felt a little jealous as she had no one to shower such praise upon her. After a few moments everyone quieted, waiting for Naruto to speak. Remembering his earlier forgetfulness he hurried to prevent another occurrence. Mom, Anko, this is Hyuga Hinata, one of my new friends." Anko sized the young Kunoichi up like a snake sizing up prey, which unnerved Hinata slightly, but her nerves were allayed when Naruto's mother stepped forward and held out her hand. Hinata took it, shaking. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Hinata. I'm Kushina, Naruto's mother. Because of his isolation he's had few friends growing up, so I'm pleased to see he made a new friend this quickly. Particularly such an attractive young Kunoichi." Hinata blushed as she and Kushina ceased shaking. "Anyways, Hinata, I notice that no one is here to greet you. Are your parents away on missions?" Hinata looked down for a moment before looking back up with confidence. "No ma'am. My family considers me a failure because I am too nice, too weak for them. As such I did not expect any of them to be here." Kushina looked puzzled that anyone could dislike this cheerful Kunoichi. "Well, that won't do. That won't do at all. Well, here's a thought. Since we have a few hours to kill we were planning to take Naruto to buy some gear before we meet the Akimichis for dinner. Why don't you join us? It'll be my treat. And this way I can get to know you better." Kushina was not unobservant and she had seen the way Hinata had been looking at her son. Before Hinata could reply Naruto spoke up. "Shopping sounds good mom, but I promise Aji said I'd stop by and see him after graduation." Anko snorted and Rin chuckled. Kushina shook her head as Hinata looked confused. "I really wish you'd stop calling him that, Naruto. It's disrespectful." Hinata was now even more confused. Naruto just smirked and then turned to look over his shoulder. "Hey Kiba, we're meeting Chaoji and his dad for dinner at Hikaru's tonight at 6 for a celebratory dinner. You and your family are welcome to join us." Kiba looked up from the wrestling match that was him and his mother. "Well, my mom's got a patrol tonight, but I'll certainly be there." Kiba looked questioningly at his sister for a moment, who merely nodded back smiling. Kiba grinned and looked back at Naruto. "Yes, it'll be me and Hana then." "Hikaru's you said. Isn't that the restaurant Chaoji's always talking about?" Naruto laughed and Hinata nodded agreement with Kiba. "Yes Kiba, it is. I think it's near the Hokage's tower, on the north side." Kiba's grin grew wider as his mother growled and the wrestling began again. "Well I'll see you at UG 6 then." "Haha, now you're the one who's pinned mom." Naruto and Hinata both chuckled as they turned back to face the three adult Kunoichi. "So, shall we get started?" Naruto asked innocently enough, but the grin on his face belied the fact that he was looking forward to buying some custom gear. Konoha shopping district. As they moved from shop to shop picking out items Hinata noticed three things. First was that while all three of the women in Naruto's life teased him endlessly, they all seemed to genuinely care about his well-being. The second was wherever they went numerous villagers would smile at Naruto for a moment before recognition set in, and then they would just glare in his direction. Though Hinata noticed that no one about her age or younger seemed to have this sort of reaction. Third was that while she was sure he must be aware of it, Naruto appeared to simply be ignoring it and enjoying the shopping. The same could not be said for his guardians. At one shop, a weapons shop, while Naruto was looking over numerous exotic and traditional shinobi weapons, Hinata caught Anko, giving the shopkeeper a quiet but stern talking to. She couldn't hear much, but she did catch Anko clearly saying, "If I catch you selling either of these genuine inferior products or overcharging them, I'll see that you are given an all expenses paid visit to the bottom level of hell." Hinata shuddered. Whatever this was about, she was sure it was related to the secret that Naruto mentioned, but for the life of her she couldn't figure out what. Their next stop was another weapon shop, run by a retired shinobi. Hinata was pleased to note that when the shopkeeper recognized Naruto he didn't recoil, but rather grinned wider. A few seconds later she knew the reason. "Naruto. Ah, I see you're now a genin, if that hit you're wearing is any indication. Guess that means my best customer is doing pretty well." Hinata blinked as Naruto turned to face her. "Hinata, I'd like you to meet Kane. He was a good friend of my parents before I was born and he's been making kunai for the traps back home for us for years. Kane, this is Hinata, one of the new friends I made today." "Oh, is she now? Well, it's always a pleasure to meet a new friend of Naruto's. Lord knows he's needed some new friends." Kane turned his attention to the three women. "So I'm guessing you are here to pick up the special order you placed last month." Naruto looked quizzically between Kane and his mother. "Order? What's Kane talking about mom? The traps are fully stocked for the next 3 months." Kushina smiled at her son. "It's something special, a gift for you dear." Kushina took an intricately carved wooden box from Kane and opened it, revealing a set of oddly pronged kunai with inscriptions on both sides. "I had these made in memory of your father. They are similar to the ones he would always use in battle." Kushina began to tear up slightly as she spoke about her dead lover. "I had Kane inscribe your name on one side and both the Uzumaki and Namikaze clan names on the other. It's my hope that you will carry these into battle with you and never forget where you came from. Why your father would be so proud of you to see you standing like this right now. Yua." Kushina broke down crying and dropped to her knees. Anko caught the wooden box and closed it before it could spill and Rin rushed to Kushina's side, comforting her. Naruto stood at a loss for a moment, resplendent in his new shinobi uniform. Earlier in their shopping his mom had sprung another surprise on him. A custom-tailored jacket, red on one side like his current one, but with the Uzumaki symbol on a field of blue on the back of it. It also had a gray-green inner lining, making the jacket reversible to improve his camouflage while on missions. They had also got him a pair of fingerless black gloves with metal plates on the back, also inscribed with the Uzumaki clan symbol, and some dark green pants and shirts, the pants already equipped with kunai holsters. Hinata watched as Naruto knelt by his mother, hugging her before helping her to her feet. Kushina wiped her eyes briefly before seeming to regain composure. I am sorry. It's just, Naruto reminds me so much of his father right now, and it just brought so many memories flooding back. Naruto and Rin both put their hands on Kushina's arms. It's okay mom. I understand. Kushina smiled and lightly patted his hand before pulling out her pouch and paying Kane for the custom kunai, as well as a set of exploding tags, and, after thinking about it for a moment, an extra set of kunai. With how fast Naruto wore them out, she figured he couldn't have too many. Meanwhile Naruto was showing Hinata around Kane's shop, both teenagers laughing and smiling, as she showed you an assortment of rare and exotic weapons that Kane had both purchased and forged himself. He proudly showed Hinata a katana that Kane had on display as an example only, with a depiction of a shinobi and the Kyuubi no Kitsune locked in eternal battle. Kane made this after my father gave his life to defeat the Kyuubi no Kitsune to honor his sacrifice. He told me that when I make Jounin that this is going to be his present to me. Hinata smiled at Naruto's exuberance as he spoke excitedly about the sword. She could tell he looked up to his father as a hero, as someone he wished to emulate. Hinata sighed silently to herself, wishing she had someone like that to look up to. Turning her head to look at Anko and Rin, both of who proudly wore hit-8 on their foreheads, Hinata wondered if she couldn't use one of these strong women for that role. She was snapped out of her reverie by Naruto, dragging her excitedly over to another stand where he had just noticed that Kane had some new swords that he had gotten in from the Earth Country. Hokage's office, approximately 5:30. Sarutobi sat smoking his pipe quietly as he read over the latest request from the village council. It seemed that they were requesting the only last Sharingan user in Konoha be assigned as Uchiha Sasuke's Jounin instructor. Sarutobi sighed as he set the paper down. Hada Kakashi was a genius. There was no doubt about that. But the Jounin did have an annoying habit of always being late and reading perverted novels all the time. Though, he did have to admit, the perverted Jounin did have good taste. Sarutobi chuckled, having several of Kakashi's favorite orange-covered novels in his own private collection as well. Sighing he stamped the paper approved with his seal and moved it to the out pile. Just as he was reaching for the next paper on the stack there was a knock at the door and his secretary poked her head in. Yes Arisa. Sir, you said to inform you when the Uzumakis arrived. Sarutobi chuckled. Well, go ahead and send them in then Arisa. And Arisa. Yes sir. Since I have no other meetings scheduled this evening, you may take the rest of the day off. Arisa smiled and nodded before ducking back through his office doors, which were opened a few seconds later by the psychologically intimidating figure of Mitarashi Anko, flanked by Uzumaki Kushina and Rin. Following them were Naruto, wearing new clothes it would seem, and is that a Hyuga? Hinata I believe her name is. I recognize her from the graduation records. As Naruto approached his desk, followed more tentatively by Hinata, the Hokage saw a glint in Naruto's eyes and a smirk upon his face. Oh no. Shall we give the old man a heart attack kit? Naruto chuckled to himself. Why not Kitsune? Why not? Naruto performed a few quick hand signs and disappeared in a puff of smoke, replaced with a buxom naked blonde version of himself, covered only by a few carefully positioned wisps of smoke. Sarutobi was blown backwards by the force of the blood exiting his nostrils. Naruto's cheer of victory was short-lived however, as he was smacked on the back of the head by 3 Anoit Kunoichi. Naruto was too busy holding the back of his head in pain as he dropped the jutsu to notice Hinata was blushing like crazy and had blood leaking from one nostril. Oh. What was that for? Kushina crossed her arms, staring firmly at her son. That was for using that technique again. I thought I forbade you to use that outside of possible use during a mission. But mom. It's so easy to prank the old man using it. Kushina's look remained stern, but behind her Anko snorted, covering her face with her hand, and even Rin had a smile on her face as she shook her head ruefully. Naruto. What are we going to do with you? Naruto chuckled and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Everyone turned to face the Hokage's desk again as Sarutobi came around with a groan as he pulled himself back upright. No one noticed Hinata hastily wiping blood off her upper lip. Konoha Market District. Naruto and Hinata chatted animatedly as they led the way to Hikaru's, Kushina and Rin trailing behind, trying to keep Anko from being distracted by sharp-end shinies at various booths as they walked past. They continued like this for a few minutes before finally reaching Hikaru's. Hinata, who had never actually been to the restaurant, let out a gasp at the sight of it. Hikaru's is a large elegant 2-story restaurant. It is known for its very large menu of items, its extremely efficient cooking staff, and for the fact that, with very few exceptions, you need a reservation a month in advance to eat there anytime after 4 in the afternoon. Of course, Naruto and the Akamichi clan were some of the restaurant's best customers, and there is a large table always kept open just in case they drop by. Hey Naruto. Finally you're here. Hinata blinked as Naruto laughed and ran ahead towards the entrance. Choji was standing just outside the doorway, a distinct lack of food in his hands. Naruto and Choji bear hugged one another as the 4 kunoichi caught up to him. It's about time Naruto. My dad's already inside waiting for us. He has our usual table and he ordered the usual appetizer spread. Shikamaru and his father aren't with you this time Choji-kun? Kushina asked with a smile as she approached. Rin and Anko were behind her, laughing with Hinata. Apparently the 3 younger kunoichi had been sharing a joke. Choji shook his head no. No. Apparently Shika's mom wanted to celebrate his graduation at home. Well, we both know what he must think of that. Naruto replied. Anko chuckled. Well, that just means more food for us. Now let's get some sake and dango and have us a party. Anko led the way into the restaurant followed swiftly by Naruto and Choji. Hinata was about to follow when she felt a hand on her shoulder. Turning she found that it belonged to Kushina. Why don't you and Rin go inside Hinata? I'll wait out here for Kiba and his sister. But, just to warn you, my son has the appetite of an Akamichi, so please don't be surprised or turned off by what you are about to witness. Choji and Naruto routinely hold eating contests when they come here. Kushina chuckled and removed her hand, moving to take a seat on a bench to await the Inuzukas. Hinata mulled over Kushina's comments for a moment and then chuckled, just before Rin grabbed her arm and dragged her inside after her. Come on, if we don't hurry those black holes of ninjas will eat everything. Rin said as she dragged Hinata behind her. Once inside Hinata was struck by a sight that would have had the legendary Son Goku drooling. A massive table was set with huge trays of every kind of appetizer you could possibly imagine, including a 3-tier tray filled with nothing but dango, 6 different kinds of dango. Hinata noted that Anko had made a beeline straight for the dango, while Naruto and Choji were sitting near Choji's father. All 3 were diving into the food with gusto. She honestly had to wonder where they were putting it all. Taking a seat near Naruto she flipped her hair over her shoulder before gingerly picking up a delicate-looking sweet pastry and taking a bite. Hinata was surprised to find that while the outside of the pastry was sweet, the inside was actually comprised of savory barbecue pork filling. Looking back towards Naruto and Choji she noticed that each of them had an entire tray of the pastries in front of them and were digging in with wild abandon. Come on boys. Munch dig in. We need to clear the appetizers before the main courses arrive. Akamichi Chauza showed just as much gusto as his son and his friend when it came to digging into the food. And surprisingly Hinata noted, so did Anko, at least when it came to the dango. And the sake lots of sake. Hinata blanched again as she realized that there were 4 large bottles of sake stacked in front of Anko, and one was already empty. How the hell did she manage that? Hinata wondered silently to herself. Kiba chose that particular moment to burst into the restaurant, loudly announcing I have arrived. This was swiftly followed by Kiba thudding into the ground as his sister Hana punched him in the head. Quiet down runt. Kushina followed the duo in, smiling. Everyone at the table chuckled as Kiba took a seat across from Naruto, licking his lips and rubbing his hands as he prepared to dig in. It did Akamasu. Kiba exclaimed, Akamaru seconding this with a bark. Hinata giggled as her friend and his companion dug into a tray of fried chicken. For the next few minutes there was discussion amongst the 5 kunoichi and a seeming race to consume as much food as possible between the men. Surprisingly to Hinata, Naruto appeared to be surpassing even Akamichi Chauza. Naruto was downing appetizer after appetizer with such speed that Kiba had ceased in his own eating to stare in awe. Anyone who could out-eat an Akamichi was a spectacle to behold. But can he keep it up? For those of you reading, imagine Son Goku from Dragon Ball Z and you have a general idea of just how fast Naruto is eating. A shapely brunette woman wearing a fancy kimono and smoking a cigarette approached a few minutes later with a pen and a pad of paper held in her hands, clearly coming to take their order. When she reached their table Kushina stood up immediately and to the surprise of no one at the table except Kiba and Hinata, embraced the woman in a hug. Hikaru. The woman grunted under Kushina's assault, a sentiment shared by Naruto as he snorted. Oyama Hikaru, the only other person on the planet who regularly had to suffer from Kushina's hugs of steel. When Kushina finally let go Hikaru finally spoke. Kushina. How many times have I told you not to do that? It's embarrassing. Kushina looked sheepish under Hikaru's verbal barrage until she finally finished. After taking a deep breath Hikaru opened her eyes again and smiled. Now that that's been said, Hikaru began, we can finally get down to business. I'm sure I already know your order Kushina. Kushina chuckled as Hikaru continued. As well as those of the 2 Akamichis. They haven't ordered anything different in the 5 years they've both been coming here. She snorted when Chaoza both looked up from their food with big grins on their face. And I'm guessing that you would like a tray of smoked salmon, 6 trays of barbecue beef, and the endless rice combo, am I right? Naruto's answering grin told her all she needed to know. Kiba and Hinata looked at him in confusion. As Hikaru continued, they leant in and asked him simultaneously. What's an endless rice combo? Naruto grinned before replying quietly. It's an all-you-can-eat supply of 3 different rice dishes. Bowls of sticky rice, fried rice, and a spicy sweet rice. Perfect for someone like me, because for some reason I have a high metabolism, so I store a lot of energy with big meals and burn it off fast training. I swear, if she and my mom weren't old friends, I bet Oba-chan there would ban me for Liaitai. Naruto's comment was interrupted by Hikaru grabbing him by his ear and jolting his head. Don't call me Oba-chan, she said before releasing him. Naruto rubbed at his ear muttering Itai as Hikaru turned to Hinata. So miss, what'll it be? Hinata thought for a moment before asking, do you do sukiyaki? Hikaru grinned. We certainly do. Next to our smoked salmon and barbecued beef, it's one of our best sellers. And that's after we take the Akimichis and Naruto out of the equation. Everyone gathered at the table laughed at this. As Hikaru turned to ask Kiba for his order, Hana let out a gasp and suddenly hopped out of her seat and ran towards the entrance. Everyone at the table ceased eating, even the Akamichis, and turned to see what could cause Hana to react like that. The sight that greeted them was of Hana wrapped in the arms of Mizuki and sharing a deep kiss with him. Kiba instantly began glowering and Hinata lost her smile. She noticed that Naruto had shown a brief loss of composure before he returned to his usual smiling self. Hinata wondered why Naruto seemed so used to keeping up such a mask, but she didn't wonder long as Hana led Mizuki over to their table. Everyone, this is my boyfriend Mizuki. I know most of you know him, but Uzumaki-san, Rin-san, Mizuki here is an instructor at the academy, and he was one of the 2 who administered the genin exam to your son Kushina. Kushina and Rin both smiled and said hello politely as Mizuki took a seat beside Hana. As he smiled and looked around the table, he was met with a glower from Kiba and smiles from, mostly, everyone else. He assumed Kiba's glower was simple brotherly protectiveness and waved it off as irrelevant. He had more important things to think about after all. Their food was brought quickly, and everyone but Kushina, Rin, and Anko were shocked by the huge amount of food consumed by the 2 Akamichis and Naruto. Even Kiba, who Hana jokingly said had a never-ending stomach, couldn't keep up. Anko was nearly manic over her food. Hinata was surprised that the slightly aggressive Takebetsu Jounin wasn't digging into rare meat or something. Instead, Anko had a huge platter of various types of dango in front of her, and she was digging into it with relish, literally biting at the hands of anyone who attempted to pilfer one of her precious dango. Hinata actually got a little jealous when Anko teased Naruto partway through the meal by eating a piece of dango suggestively and winking at him, but neither Naruto nor Anko seemed to notice. By the time they had finished and were waiting for dessert, almost everyone at the table was nice and full and nursing drinks of various sorts. When Hinata turned to ask Naruto a question, she sweat dropped as she finally realized just how much he had eaten. Sitting next to him were about 20 empty bowls all stacked together, and the 7 trays of food that had been served to him were all cleared of food. Her delay cost her the chance to ask Naruto her question, as he promptly stood up and excused himself to go use the restroom. Hinata turned her head to look across at Hana again when Mizuki stood and excused himself as well. As Mizuki headed towards the restroom, Hinata and Kiba shared a look. After a few moments, Kiba nodded at her, and Hinata swiftly excused herself and headed for the women's restroom. Once inside, she went swiftly to a stall and used her Byakugan. She fought the urge to bleed from the nose as she spied on the men's restroom to spy on Mizuki. Meanwhile, in said men's restroom, Naruto was just pulling up his pants and going to wash his hands. Mizuki and Naruto were talking, and Hinata did her best to read their lips. You know, Naruto, Mizuki began, initiating the conversation, I was quite impressed with your showing during the exam. Well, you didn't perform the requested technique, which did mean we had to mark you down. It was only a small number of points you lost, as you had actually performed a much more advanced technique. We had given you extra points for performing such an advanced technique. But I'm curious. How did you learn such an advanced technique? Last time I checked, the only copy of the scroll it's recorded on was locked in the Hokage's tower. Hinata gasped, but kept her focus as Naruto responded. Actually, Mizuki-sensei, there is a second copy of the scroll. The Hokage had it made when I was child so that my mother could teach me some of the techniques when I got older. He felt that, as the child of the Yondaime, that it was my right to learn those techniques. Mizuki was glad Naruto couldn't see his face, as he had a hard time hiding his glee. A copy of the forbidden scroll outside the strict security of the Hokage's vaults. This is perfect. So now a copy resides in the library of the Namikaze compound, on a pedestal as it deserves, though right now it's serving as decoration more than anything else. I know all the jutsus from it I can handle at the moment, and it will be a while before I have the training to learn any others. Naruto finished washing his hands and dried them off quickly. Anyways Mizuki, I'm going to head back to rejoin everybody. My dessert should be on the table by now and I want to get to it before Chaoji gets any ideas. As Naruto left, Mizuki was too busy changing his plans in his head to notice the smirk on Naruto's face. But a pale-eyed Kunoichi didn't. She quickly hurried out of the restroom to follow Naruto back to the table quietly. Half an hour later everyone was sated and leaving. Kushina and Akimichi Chauza had foot the bill for the meal, much to the delight of Kiba, Hana, and everyone else. Rin was apparently in a discussion with both Akamichis about diets to help improve strength and chakra capacity, Naruto was patting his stomach contentedly, and Akamaru was asleep on top of Kiba's head. As Anko finished off her last piece of dango, she ambushed Naruto with a hug from behind, much to the dismay of Hinata, because Anko's ample bosom was pressed tightly against Naruto's back. Congratulations Gaki, you're finally a true shinobi. Before Hinata could get her nerve up and peel the slightly drunk Kunoichi off of Naruto, Anko let go and stumbled backward slightly. Yeah Naruto, we did it man. Kiba high-fived Naruto as he said this, both newly minted genin grinning like idiots. Behind Kiba, Hana and Mizuki were sharing a long kiss. Well dear, I've got to go. I've got patrol duty tonight and if I'm late hate will have my hide. Mizuki said, finally breaking the kiss. He waved goodnight to everyone before leaping onto a rooftop. Most of the party waved goodbye back. The exceptions were, I think you can guess who by now, Naruto, Kiba and Hinata, all of who shared a meaningful glance before Kiba's sister grabbed him by the arm and started to drag him off, claiming she wanted to get home and check on Kuramaru's new litter. Thank you for the meal. Hinata said formally, bowing quickly to Kushina. I must get home before it gets any later. See you tomorrow Naruto. The last part of this she addressed to the grinning blonde with a smile before turning and running off towards the Hyuga compound. Turning, Naruto and Kushina found that Rin had just finished her conversation with the Akamichis and was walking back towards them, Chauza and his son laughing uproariously as they headed off towards the Akamichi compound and a good night's sleep. As she came back up to Naruto, Kushina and Anko, Rin noticed that Naruto had one of his infamous pranking smirks on his face, along with a seriousness in his eyes. Catching his cues, all three Kunoichi headed off down the street at high speed trailed by Naruto, heading for the forest outside of Konoha and the well-guarded Namikaze compound. Since Naruto hadn't told them what was up yet, they could tell it was both serious and that they at least had time to get to the security of the compound before discussing it. As they disappeared around a bend, a black-cloaked figure stepped out from a balcony on the second story of Hikaru's, the moonlight glinting off silver and gold lines on her cheeks. Hikaru stood next to the figure, her cigarette smoldering in the cool night air. Some kid isn't he Kabatsu Dono, Hikaru said, her arms crossed. The cloaked figure of Kabatsu Kora smiled. That he is, Hikaru-san. That he is. The wind rustled around her and a hawk's cry rang out in the night. Uzumaki Namikaze compound, outside Konoha, midnight. A shadowy figure moved swiftly and quietly towards the wall surrounding the compound. As it approaches it performs a few hand seals and disrupts a genjutsu, revealing the wall to be even taller and covered with spikes. The figure quickly bounces up over the wall, carefully avoiding the spikes. As the figure crests the wall it tosses several shuriken out over the courtyard of the compound, drawing the fire of several traps as he drops silently below them and swiftly crosses to the clearly marked library, countering launched kunai and shuriken. When the figure reached the library it swiftly and quietly vaulted through an open room into the quiet dark empty building. Sitting on a pedestal in the back of the room sat a large scroll. The figure grinned as it approached swiftly, eyes wary for traps. Finding none, the figure steps up to the pedestal, preparing carefully to remove the scroll and to be ready to run if need be. Just before the figure can place his hands on the scroll and its pedestal vanish in a puff of smoke. What the fuck? The scroll pedestal was replaced by Naruto standing, glaring right into the figure's eyes. Nah Mizuki. This scroll isn't for the likes of traitors like you. Naruto's grin was feral as chakra began to roll off him in waves, his killing intent literally forcing Mizuki back. Now, let's see what you can really do, bastard. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto was suddenly replicated around the rim of the room 100-fold, every single clone radiating killer intent. Mizuki blanched, but before he could move Naruto struck out at him with a 1-2 combo, before dropping below Mizuki's counterattack to deliver an open palm strike to his midsection, launching him back. Mizuki backflipped and regained a standing position, quickly drawing his 2 Fuma shuriken. How did you know I'd be coming? Naruto's grin deepened, revealing his prominent canines as his whisker marks deepened. Simple, team. I already knew you tried to sabotage my genin exam. When you started questioning after the Kage Bunshin I figured you were trying to find out about the scroll. You didn't realize my lie about having a copy until it was too late, as you were too eager to believe that I was a little brat with no perception whatsoever. But by now, the Hokage knows of your betrayal, and his Anbu are moving in on the compound as we speak. Of course, they won't make it in time to apprehend you if you don't submit immediately. Mizuki began spinning both shuriken rapidly and then charged at Naruto, preparing to strike him down. "I demon brat." Naruto made no move to defend himself. "Most of the villagers may hate and despise what I carry inside." Mizuki's shuriken struck the unmoving genin in mid-sentence as Mizuki grinned. But his grin was cut short as Naruto vanished in a blast of smoke. In another corner of the room his voice continued speaking as another Naruto stepped out of the ring and approached, his hands in the pockets of his new jacket. "Of me, but it is traitors like you who truly deserve their hatred. You betray this great city and all it has given you. You are the real traitor, the real demon. And if you do not submit, I cannot be held responsible for what will happen to you. You brat. I'll kill you. Thanks to you all my plans are ruined." Mizuki launched himself at Naruto again, having determined from the fact that he continued the previous Naruto speech that he is likely the real Naruto. As Mizuki brought his spinning shuriken in to strike Naruto he grinned. "I demon bra." Mizuki's attack cry was cut off as Naruto's lightning-quick movements dropped him under Mizuki's guard and brought him up between his arms, his blocks knocking Mizuki's arms away so hard he lost his grip on his shuriken before Naruto slammed his hands into Mizuki's throat and chest, cutting off his tirade and sending him flying back, this time to land on his back. The two errant shurikens slammed into a pair of clones who promptly vanished. Hokage's office. In the Hokage's office a small contingent watched the events unfold in Naruto's library. Sarutobi sat flanked by two Anbu, while another pair guarded Inyazuka Hana, brought in under suspicion due to her relationship with Mizuki, and Yumino Ruka, and the Hokage's interrogation specialist Marino Ibiki watched on. Hana's frank shock and disgust with Mizuki's actions told the Hokage all he needed, and a nod shared with Ibiki indicated that the younger man agreed. Hana was completely innocent in these matters. As Mizuki regained his feet and drew a pair of kunai to strike at Naruto, Hana gasped. A shadow had appeared behind Mizuki, resolving immediately into a copy of Hana. When it had fully materialized a figure began speaking with Hana's voice. "Mizuki, darling. Why are you doing this? Why are you jeopardizing your career? You and I both know he is merely the jailer, not the demon. So why do this? Why betray our beloved Konoha?" Mizuki spun, shocked by Hana standing there. "Ah Hana, what are you doing here? You were never supposed to find out about this." "No, I suppose she wasn't." Naruto's voice emerged from Hana's lips, shocking Mizuki into a moment of indecision. That was all it took for Naruto to strike with Mizuki's own Fuma Shuriken. Clang, ass. Hana was nearly in tears. Mizuki collapsed, very nearly beheaded by the incoming shuriken, which had collided with his neck in a hollow between them. But they were cutting into his neck, and if he moved further he knew he would kill himself. The figure of Hana vanished, replaced by a not smiling Naruto. Uzumaki Namika's compound, library. Naruto approached the now prone Mizuki, Senbon thrown by the ring of encroaching clones slamming into Mizuki's arms, forcing him to drop his kunai. "Now Mizuki, you begin to understand. I am not the demon fox. I am its jailer. My father sacrificed me having a normal life to protect the village. I willing learn to master this curse so that I might protect the village as he did." Snored. "Yeah, like having the charka of a demon lord at your disposal is really a curse." Kyuubi of course got no response as Naruto continued. "You miscalculated, team. You assumed that because of the Hokage's law about not revealing the existence of the Kyuubi to me, that I would not know about it. But you were wrong. For years now I have had an arrangement with the Kyuubi. And do you know what?" Naruto leant down next to Mizuki's ear, whispering words that only he could hear. "Sometimes, when the Kyuubi gets really bored, I let him loose, just for a moment, so he can have some fun. Like now." Mizuki's eyes widened as Naruto brought his right hand up to Mizuki's face, pressing his fingers on 5 points around his forehead and face. "Raiten. Dengeki Haku." Mizuki was knocked unconscious by the blast of electricity that was released through him. Naruto swiftly removed the shuriken from around his neck before the defeated Chunin could collapse and sever his own head. Naruto and the Kyuubi both knew that Anbu would want the traitor alive. Naruto turned and walked out the library's now open door into the waiting arms of his mother and aunt, his clones remaining to keep watch on Mizuki until the Anbu came. Back in the Hokage's office, Hana cried on Iruka's shoulder, distraught both over Mizuki's wounds and that he would turn traitor. Ibiki merely stared calmly at the crystal ball and the now unconscious Mizuki. Suddenly he smirked and began laughing. Everyone in the room but the crying Hana looked at Ibiki with incredulity. When he finally finished laughing the Hokage asked one question. "What is so funny, Ibiki?" Ibiki started laughing again and indicated for the Hokage to focus the image on Mizuki's collapsed form. When he did, all watching noticed something. Mizuki had been so frightened by Naruto that he pissed himself. The Hokage sighed as all 4 Anbu joined Ibiki in laughing, just as a squad of Anbu arrived in the image to bring back the traitor. The Hokage took a puff on his pipe. It appeared that Naruto was going to be quite a handful. The sun rose the next morning over a bustling Konoha. Here and there merchants hurried, getting ready for the day's transactions. In bedrooms all over the city 30 newly promoted genin woke, yawning, to a day of excitement. They were to report for their team assignments. In one such room, decorated in a multitude of pinks, a pink-haired kunoichi stood before her mirror, proudly declaring yes. Today, I'll be assigned to a team with Sasu-kun. I just know it. Inside her head a black and white version of herself exclaimed for sure. In another part of the city a black-haired genin wearing sunglasses and a heavy white coat was caring for several hives of insects quietly in a cooled shed in the hive, as it is known to those around it, the close-knit collection of buildings that make up the Aburam clan holdings. His thoughts were on caring for the insects, as there was plenty of time before team assignments. In a spotlessly clean and formally elegant compound near the center of the older district of Konoha, a purple-haired ninja pulled on a pale purple and white jacket on over her under-tunic and fishnet shirt, smiling into her mirror as she readjusted the hit I-8 around her neck before she exited the room. Please Kami, let me be on Naruto's team. In a brightly lit flower shop a long blonde-haired kunoichi yelled goodbye to her father before running out the door. Her hair flowed in the wind behind her as she ran towards the academy. I still can't believe that new guy complimented my skills. Sasuke never even notices. In a two-story building close to the Konoha hospital, an orange-haired boy was dragged out of bed by an already dressed black-haired kunoichi and an annoyed redhead with a hit I-8 wrapped around his right arm. Come on Ichigo. We're going to be late if we let your lazy butt sleep in. Both the kunoichi and the redhead dodged out of the way as the still sleeping orange head was attacked by an older man in a doctor's coat, starting a tussle. The two looked at each other for a moment before escaping from the room before they could get dragged into their friend's daily wrestling match with his father. At a takoyaki stand near the academy, a spiky black-haired ninja and his bulky companion ate, one quietly the other not so, both preparing for the day. Troublesome. In a park near the academy an unruly black-haired teen in a heavy fur-lined coat was running around, chazzing and being chazzed by an off-white puppy who was energetically barking. To an observer it looked like a simple game of tag, but for the two involved, it was a useful tool to improve their awareness of each other's abilities. In the now largely empty Uchiha neighborhood a grumpy emo duck butt-haired ninja stomped out of a house in his usual blue shirt, with the Uchiha clan marking on the back. With his hands in his pockets he fixed his emo hair in a mirror quickly before heading off towards the academy. Outside of Konoha the Uzumaki Namika's compound was in an uproar as two very damn kunoichi chazzed after a laughing blonde with kunai. Naruto. How many times do I have to beat it into you that the bucket of water over the door is not funny? Rin roared as Naruto dodged a swipe from her kunai. Laughing, Naruto shouted back over his shoulder. But it's a classic. No chakra manipulation or anything to warn even the most suspicious of ninja. I bet I could even get the old man with eye. Whatever Naruto was going to say was interrupted as Kushina's kunai sliced through his throat. With a puff of smoke the cage bunshin disappeared and Kushina turned to find Rin looking at her in shock. Why you were going for a kill strike? Kushina put her hand on her hip. It's Naruto. Did you really think he wasn't using a cage bunshin to perform the prank? He's probably halfway to Konoha by now and without his stuffy mom and aunt to keep an eye on him. On the roof above them a second cage bunshin snickered and then dismissed itself. In the middle of the path to Konoha Naruto snickered as well as he received the cage bunshin's memories. Trust your mom to know when you use a cage bunshin, kid. Well, she was married to the guy who pulled a prank on both of us. The Kyuubi was quiet for a moment. Wait kid. Naruto started laughing uncontrollably as he kept on his way to Konoha and his team assignment. He had new clothes, he'd managed to prank his mom and aunt, and he managed to get a poke in at the Kyuubi. Today was looking up. Outside Konoha Ninja Academy, Naruto arrived to find his new friends Kiba and Hinata chatting outside when he landed next to them with a WHMPH. Well guys, I pranked my mom this morning, so I'm set for the day. Naruto was grinning like an idiot, his hit I-8 proudly displayed on his upper arm and a cool pair of shades sitting on his forehead. Hey Naruto, Kiba said with a grin, glad you made it. Yeah, Hinata seconded, smiling and blushing slightly, it's nearly time for us to receive our team assignments. We better get inside. Akamaru barked happily and leapt off Kiba's headed, leading the three laughing genin inside. Nearby, Uchiha Sasuke stepped out from behind a tree, grinning. No way in hell am I being placed on a team with it that dope. Still grinning the Uchiha headed inside. Konoha Ninja Academy Classroom A. The three chattering ninja entered the classroom to find over 20 of their classmates already there. Naruto waved hello to Chaoji as they walked up the steps past him, heading for empty seats in the back row. Naruto took a seat next to the blonde girl from the other day, while Hinata sat next to him and Kiba sat in the final seat next to the stairs. I think her name was Ino. I wonder why she isn't fighting that pink-haired chick for a seat next to Oh, he just came in. No wonder she wasn't fighting with Sakura. But why isn't she going to sit next to him and Naruto's musings were interrupted by Kiba. Hey Naruto, what's up buddy? Naruto blinked. Dwa. He said. Oh, sorry, was lost in thought for a moment. Hinata noticed Naruto glanced towards Ino for a moment as he said this and felt a twinge of jealousy. Why do the guys always go for Ino? Hinata thought to herself. What does she have that I don't? Hinata was still unaware that her choice of clothing prevented said guys from noticing the stunning figure she was developing, unlike the form-fitting dark purple clothing Ino was prone to wearing. Well, I asked you why you're wearing your forehead protector on your arm. Weren't you wearing it on your forehead yesterday? Kiba continued, drawing Hinata back to reality. Haha, well, it interfered with wearing my sunglasses, so I decided that my arm would be an acceptable place for it, at least for now. What about you, Hinata? Why are you wearing yours around your neck? Hinata, showing a hint of the timidity she still fraught at times, poked her index fingers together while looking down for a moment before looking back up and replying. Well, simple. When I use my family's Kekkei Genkai it causes pressure in some of the blood flow in my face and forehead, and when I tested using it last night after I got home, the pressure from my hit I ate was causing it to be a bit painful. So I decided to just wear it around my neck. Hinata. Naruto began. Could it maybe just be that you had it tied on too tightly? Hinata blinked and then blushed. I hadn't thought of that. Kiba and Naruto both laughed as Hinata looked down sheepishly. Duh. On Naruto's other side Ino kept sneaking glances at him, blushing each time. A few minutes later the trio looked up from their discussion at the sound of a commotion coming from the doorway. Abarai Renji and Kichiki Rukia were dragging a bruised Ichigo in behind them, followed by Iruka. Iruka was shaking his head as he carried a sheet of paper with the team assignments. Iruka-sensei. Where's Mizuki-sensei? Sakura asked when there was no sign of Mizuki after a few minutes. Iruka's eyes darkened. Students, it is my shame to inform you that your trusted teacher Mizuki was arrested by Anbu last night after breaking into a family compound and attempting to steal a copy of a forbidden scroll. Most of the class let out gasps of shock at this news, looks of horror or dismay on their faces. Furthermore, if it weren't for the quick thinking and skills of one of your classmates, Mizuki would have gotten away with the scroll, with no one knowing who did it. The entire class looked shocked. One of their own had fought and taken down a Chunin. Unbelievable. There were a few exceptions. Ichigo snorted, wondering who was stupid enough to take on Mizuki. Sasuke frowned and narrowed his eyes, looking around the room trying to figure out who it was, and Naruto's two friends both turned to look at him, various mixes of shock, fear, dismay, and admiration on their faces. Naruto sheepishly scratched the back of his head. This exchange did not go unnoticed by Ino. Those three don't seem surprised by the news. Could it have been one of them? And why are they both looking at Naruto MG? Could it really have been him? When Naruto didn't stand up or make a comment, Iruka coughed and looked pointedly at him before continuing. Now, on to business. Iruka was interrupted by Sakura raising her hand. Yes, Sakura. What is it? Sensei. If you don't mind, could you tell us who it was who fought Mizuki? Sakura asked. She saw Sasuke perk up at her question, and inner Sakura came forward. Yes. I got his attention. This is great. Iruka put his hand to his forehead and sighed. A student who fought Mizuki was Uzumaki Naruto. The entire class let out shouts of surprise. Whispers of "Is that the new guy? And how the hell did he manage that?" were scattered throughout the room. A few people took extra special attention. As he looked around the room Naruto noticed that Shino Aburam was regarding him with a calculating look before giving him a nod. Shino already knew about his partner, but still, a nod of respect from Shino was a nod of respect from Shino. He saw Uchiha Sasuke glaring at him with a cold fire and noticed that Ino next to him had her mouth open in shock. As he glared, Sasuke was thinking to himself, wondering how this dope could possibly have beat Mizuki. I saw how poorly he did against Mizuki during the Taijutsu exam. It has to be a lie. Someone else beat Mizuki and then gave Naruto the credit when Anbu arrived to boost his reputation. Yeah, that was it. Sasuke's glare deepened. Now, as I was trying to say before. Iruka waited until everyone had quieted down and then began the speech he had tried to start earlier. Beginning today you are all real ninjas. But you are still merely rookie genin. The hard part has just started. Everyone in the room became attentive, hanging on to Iruka's every word. Now you will soon be assigned duties by the village. So today we will be creating the 3-man teams and each team will have a jounin sensei. You will follow that sensei's instructions as you complete the assigned duties. We tried to balance team strengths so that no team will be too strong or too weak. This last comment was met with several cries of what? From around the room. Several of the new genin were thinking to themselves rather than shouting out. 3-man teams? That's just more people to get in my way, Sasuke thought to himself. I hope I'm with Sasuke. I hope I'm with Sasuke. I hope I'm with Sasuke. Sakura and inner Sakura were chanting. I hope I'm with Naruto. I hope I'm with Naruto. I hope I'm with Naruto. Both Hinata and Ino were chanting in their minds in the same rhythm, but neither would ever know. Please don't put me with that whiny fangirl of a Haruno. Several males in the room were all thinking. Sensing a disturbance in the universe, all those thinking this suddenly shared a glance before looking away. No self-respecting ninja wanted a whiny bitch on their team after all, but none of them were brave enough to say it to their faces. I will now assign the teams. Everyone became attentive again as Iruka began to read out the teams. Team 1 Team 7 is Haruno Sakura, Inyazuka Kiba, and Uchiha Sasuke. At this last announcement Sasuke snorted, Sakura stood up cheering, and Kiba face faulted onto his desk. Man Kiba, I'm sorry. Looks like you got stuck with the Uchiha. Tough break man. Naruto said as he patted Kiba on the back. Clearing his throat to regain attention after the interruptions, Iruka continued. Team 7's Jounin Sensei will be Hada Kakashi. Team 8 is Yamanaka Ino, Hyuga Hinata, and Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto's eardrums were shattered by twin shouts of Yada. That came from both sides of him. The sources of said shouts instantly turned and started glaring at one another. Now it was Kiba's turn to commiserate with Naruto. Man, I'm sorry. But looks like you just ended up on a team with two Kunoichi who both have their eyes on you. Kiba said laughing as he patted Naruto on the shoulder. It was Naruto's turn to face fault. Teammates Jounin Sensei will be Yuhi Kurenai. Since Team 9 is currently in use we will skip it. Team 10 is Aburam Shino, Nara Shikamaru, and Akamichi Chouji. Your Jounin Sensei will be Sarutobi Asuma. And finally, Team 11 is Aburai Renji, Kichiki Rukia, and Kurosaki Ichigo. Your Jounin Sensei will be Jekko Hade. Iruka folded his paper up and cleared his throat again. Now, your Jounin Senseis will meet you here in the afternoon, so go ahead and take a break until then. Iruka smiled and then left the classroom. Discussion instantly broke out. Some people went to talk to their new teammates, others marched out of the room in annoyance. Troublesome Shikamaru muttered as he stood and headed outside to watch the clouds. Chouji followed while munching on a bag of chips, and Shino soon followed sedately after picking up his bag. Naruto saw Uchiha Sasuke standing and glaring at him, but he was distracted when Kiba put his hand on his shoulder. Hey man, I'm going to go take Akamaru outside. Why don't you and Hinata come join me for lunch in a little bit? Kiba said, grinning. Alright man, we'll meet you out there in a bit. Naruto replied. Kiba left with a barking Akamaru by hopping out the window. Naruto stood and turned to address Ino, who was still smiling from being placed on the same team as Naruto and wondering why she had ever been interested in Sasuke in the first place. Well Ino, I guess this makes us teammates from now on. Frankly, I'm glad it's you and Hinata I'm teamed with and not that whiny Haruno. She's still frowning after that Uchiha team. I mean, seriously. So his entire clan is gone. So what? I'm the heir to 2 clans and the only living member besides me is my mom, and you don't see me going emo all over the place. Naruto said with a smile. Ino simply smiled back, her synapses too overloaded that this cute new boy was talking to her and treating her as an annoyance to respond. Behind Naruto, Hinata felt another pang of jealousy. Thinking, she grabbed Naruto's arm. Come on Naruto, Ino. Let's go meet up with Kiba. We can eat lunch and get to know each other better outside. She said quickly. She really didn't want to have to share Naruto with another girl on team, but she resigned herself to the fact that that was the way things were. Ino stood as Naruto turned to follow Ino. Of course, he didn't get far, seeing that as soon as he turned around he came face to face with a frowning Uchiha Sasuke. What do you want, Uchiha? Naruto asked, his grin still in place. Sasuke replied with 2 words. Fight me. Naruto and Sasuke shared a long look while several members of the Sasuke fan club cheered him on. Behind Naruto, Ino and Hinata were both crossing their fingers. Ino's focus was on glaring at Sasuke for his behavior, while Sakura was staring at Ino in confusion. Come on Sasuke. Sakura shouted out loud. But inner Sakura had different thoughts. Cha. Why is Ino Pig glaring at Sasuke like that? She is after him just like I am. Does she think playing hard to get is going to win? That's it, she must be showing interest in the new guy just to make Sasuke jealous. Inner Sakura was always quite delusional. Finally Naruto blinked and replied. I do not see any point in fighting you, Uchiha Sasuke. We are both genin of the leaf. It is our duty to train and keep ourselves free from extraneous injuries so that we can perform our duties for our village, not fight amongst ourselves like children. Sasuke snorted. HMPH. I knew it had to be a lie that you fought Mizuki. You're too much of a coward to have fought him, too weak. Someone else must have fought him and given you the credit to cover up your weakness. You're pathetic. Sasuke turned on his heel and marched out of the classroom, followed by Sakura and several other members of his fan club. Naruto, Ino, and Hinata all watched silently until Sasuke was out of sight. Once he was finally gone and the sound of his entourage had died off, Naruto stretched before turning to face the 2 girls. So, shall we grab some lunch then ladies? Naruto asked, smiling. His smile turned to confusion as both girls grumpily grabbed his arms and dragged him down the stairs and out of the classroom. Naruto was too surprised to do anything. Several minutes later he was sitting under a tree with both Hinata and Ino looking at him. After several long moments Naruto sighed and began to speak. Okay. I'll tell you what happened last night. Well, Hinata, you remember when I went to use the restroom at Hikaru's? Hinata nodded silently, not wanting to admit that she had been peeping on him. Ino felt a pang of jealousy that Hinata had spent time with Naruto the day before. Though, I guess it's my fault for not noticing him at first and instead remaining focused on Sasuke. Sigh. Well, when Mizuki came in and started discussing my exam results with me, he was inordinately interested in where I was taught Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. So I decided to lay a trap for him and told him I'd learned it from a copy of a forbidden scroll normally kept locked in the Hokage's office. I figured that Iruka would have reported what I told him to the Hokage, so Mizuki would probably have been under surveillance. If the Anbu didn't move in and take him in for questioning, he would come looking for the scroll. Hinata and Ino both leant in towards him. And they both intoned in the same manner. Naruto gulped. And when he tried to take the scroll I ambushed him and fought him until he gave me an opening to take him down. I very nearly had to take his head off to beat him. Hinata and Ino both let out gasps at this, just as Kiba landed beside them in a crouch. What are the three of you so doom and gloom about? He asked, looking from at each of them in turn. Naruto was the one to answer. I was just telling them about last night, Kiba. Naruto replied resignedly, no trace of his mask present. Kiba was silent for a moment. So, you really did take him down? Kiba asked. Yeah, and Naruto trailed off. But Naruto? What's wrong? Hinata asked. She may have only known him a short time, but she was beginning to tell when something was up. She noticed that Ino had reached out and taken one of Naruto's hands in hers, but she pushed any jealousy down. This wasn't about her, this was about Naruto. Only he mattered right now. When Naruto looked back up there was a deep sadness in his eyes. There are things I can't tell you about. Not yet. Not here. It's too painful to think about sometimes and too dangerous to talk about here. Naruto managed to choke out. For what it's worth kid, I am sorry that things happened the way they did. But there is something about this world that affects us. Hashirama Senju did better than he knew when he tamed us nearly a century ago. Naruto was sucked inside his mindscape, finding himself standing before the now familiar bars of the Kyuubi's prison. What do you mean Kyuubi? Naruto was looking down at the ground, lost in thought. Ino and Hinata just held his hands and waited for him to be ready to talk. Something about this world drew us to it several hundred years ago. But that same something corrupts us, driving our sentience from us and turning us into mindless beasts. Being sealed within you is the one thing keeping me from its call. What do you mean? You tried to smash me the first time I visited you in mind. Kyuubi huffed and shifted behind the cage. I had been awoken by a whiny brat demanding power. You would have done the same in my place. Besides, living with two females, you should have learned by then never to interrupt a woman's beauty sleep. Naruto looked up with a shocked look on his face. Hinata, Ino, and Kiba could all see that Naruto's eyes were focused on something beyond them, but when they looked behind themselves, the grass was empty. You're a woman, Naruto cried out in his mind. Kyuubi snorted. 4 years you've been speaking to me, and you only now figured that out. You really would be brainless if it weren't for your teachers, now wouldn't you kid? Now, you better get back to your teammates. Looks like they are about to call a teacher to tell them you've passed out. Huh? Naruto turned to see what the Kyuubi was looking at. His eyes met a vision of his friends waving hands in front of his face, and he began to hear them calling his name as he was sucked back to wakefulness. Whoa. Sorry about that guys. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. What happened Naruto? Ino asked, real concern in her voice. As Naruto turned to look at her she finally noticed the thin markings on his face. So exotic looking she thought to herself. Can we just say it has to do with what I can't talk about yet and give you guys a rain check? Naruto laughed nervously. Hey Kiba, what are you doing over with the dope? We need to plan. Sakura's far too chipper voice interrupted them before anyone could respond to Naruto's request. Kiba cursed before standing. Damn it. Well guys, guess I have to go talk with my team. Man, this is such a drag. As Kiba started to walk away Naruto called after him. Hey Kiba, if you weren't busy, why don't we meet at that ramen place you pointed out to me yesterday for an early dinner tonight? I'm sure my mom will understand. Kiba chuckled as he looked back over his shoulder. Sure thing man, he shouted back, but I ain't paying for you. I've seen how much you can eat. Naruto sheepishly scratched the back of his head. Naruto. What did Kiba mean by that? Naruto blushed and Hinata saved him having to explain. Well, Naruto has a really high metabolism, so he tends to eat well, exorbitant amounts of food. Don't be surprised, because since we are teammates we'll likely be sharing meals together on a regular basis. Ino blinked, not 100% understanding. Hinata just giggled and assured her that you'll see. Konoha Ninja Academy Classroom A, early afternoon. Ino, Naruto, and Hinata returned to the classroom an hour later, having eaten the bento they had all brought from home. Hinata had seen Naruto's appetite the day before and surprised her teammates by bringing enough food for nearly 10 people. Ino had to admit that, as much as she viewed Hinata as a possible rival for Naruto's affections, she would definitely make a good friend. She realized that she really didn't know much at all about her new teammate, despite having been in the academy with her for 8 years, and that made Ino regret her obsession with the Uchiha. When they entered they saw that Iruka was sitting at his desk reading a book and Kiba was near the windows looking grumpy as he spoke with his new teammates. Or rather, spoke with Sakura while Sasuke sat there grumpily. Kiba was too busy dealing with Sakura to notice them. Taoji was munching away on a bag of chips, as usual, Shino appeared to be reading a biology text, and Shikamaru was napping. Naruto was almost tempted to use Rain Dengeki Haku to give him a serious case of static cling, but decided the Nara didn't deserve it. Now if it was that Uchiha team taking a nap on the other hand Naruto chuckled, drawing funny looks from several nearby students as he followed his teammates towards the back of the room and the only empty seats. Plopping down in their seats Naruto leant back, balancing his chair on 2 legs with a foot hooked under the desk and put his hands behind his head, closing his eyes to take a brief rest. A few minutes later the first group of the new instructors entered. Opening his eyes and looking down at the entrance to the room, Naruto saw a bearded ninja smoking a cigarette enter the room, followed by a brunette ninja with short hair and wearing a hat and a shapely kunoichi with long black hair and dark red eyes. Naruto grinned and chuckled deeply, drawing looks from Hinata and Ino. He put a finger to his mouth indicating for them to be quiet and then began performing a series of hand seals. Speaking quietly he caused a cage bunshin to appear lying on the floor behind him. Okay, you know what to do. Operation Get Asuma in hot water is a go. Naruto spoke quietly. His bunshin replied with Raikai before shining away. Ino and Hinata both looked at Naruto with questioning looks. He merely grinned and indicated for them to watch the front of the room where Iruka was standing. Team 11, he said, indicating the trio lounging at the front of the class, Ichigo apparently sleeping. This is your Jounin instructor, Gekko Hade. The trio in the back of the room noted that Hade appeared to be sickly as he coughed repeatedly as he led his new Genin team out of the classroom. Team 10, Iruka continued, indicating the row where Choji, Shikamaru and Shino all sat. This is your Jounin instructor, Sarutobi Asuma. He's the son of the Hokage, so you better behave yourselves. Shikamaru muttered troublesome as he stood, but before Asuma could lead his students out of the classroom, a scantily clad Anko burst through the door, wrapping Asuma in her arms and drawing a dirty look from Kurenai. Asuma, baby. Why didn't you call after last night? Was it no fun for you? Because I certainly had a good time, big boy. Anko emphasized this last part by grabbing Asuma's crotch. Asuma sputtered, utterly confused for a good several seconds, long enough to get Kurenai glaring at him, before he finally noticed Naruto cracking up in the back of the room. Putting 2 and 2 together he struck out with a punch, causing Anko to vanish in a puff of smoke, causing Naruto to laugh even harder. Naruto lost his balance in his chair and fell over backwards to the floor, still laughing as Asuma grumpily led his team out of the classroom, muttering about pranking blondes and encouraging loud-mouthed Kunoichi. Naruto finally got control of his laughter just in time to hear Iruka tell them that the woman was their sensei, Yuhi Kurenai. Compassing himself he stood and followed his teammates down the steps to meet with their new sensei. Naruto gave a sheepish grin when she glared at him, having garnered from Asuma's accusation that he was the source of the prank. Then something that had been bugging her finally clicked. This kid just used Kage Bunshin. Kurenai didn't let the surprise show on her face as she escorted her new genin from the classroom and led them outside to a grassy knoll. Sitting down cross-legged on the grass she watched as her 3 genin joined her. She watched as Ino dusted her ass off before she sat down gingerly, watched as Hinata sat down in one elegant fluid motion, and watched as Naruto cheekily did a handstand before rolling into a sitting position between his 2 teammates, grinning. Kurenai cleared her throat and began speaking. Now, you already know my name, but I'd like us all to get to know one another better, so I'll begin. Kurenai felt that it was best to get the introductions done in a friendly manner while still on familiar territory. She had their exam results, but she needed to get a feel for their personalities as well. I am Yuhi Kurenai, and I am a Genjutsu mistress. I like vodka, salted octopus, and reading. I dislike perverts and cake. My dream is to one day develop an unbreakable Genjutsu. Kurenai smiled at her new students, impressed that all 3, even the prankster Naruto, were all paying close attention. Now, how about you go next? Kurenai said, pointing to Ino. According to her dossier the girl was a typical young kunoichi, obsessed more with appearance than abilities, apparently one of numerous girls in her class, obsessed with the last loyal Uchiha. Kurenai steeled herself for a possibly annoying speech. I'm Yamanaka Ino, and I guess I'm not really all that great as a ninja, unless you count throwing weapons. Kurenai was shocked by her candor. The psych profile certainly didn't indicate anything like this would happen. I like flowers, boys, and when my father helps teach me the clan techniques. I dislike, well, let's just say I've had to reevaluate my likes and dislikes recently, so I can't really give a good answer. Kurenai noticed that Hinata was giving Ino a curious look. My dream is to one day become a powerful kunoichi, master my clan's techniques, and maybe marry a strong ninja. Neither Kurenai nor Hinata missed the sideways glance Ino gave to Naruto as she said this last part. Ah, I see. She seems to have taken a liking for her new teammate. Certainly a better choice if she is going to be obsessed with a boy right now. That Ichiha seems like a real head case. I've never met anyone more focused on revenge, not even Mitarashi Anko. Kurenai's train of thought was broken as she was reminded of Naruto's earlier prank. This kid has balls of steel to pull that sort of prank. Hopefully I can get him to turn his pranking resources to more productive endeavors. Kurenai's train of thought was again broken as Naruto spoke up. I'm Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, and I am the last living member of the Namikaze clan, son of the Yondaime Hokage, and heir to the nearly extinct Uzumaki clan. I like smoked salmon, barbecue beef, taijutsu, ramen, and dango. I dislike arrogance and those who hate others for no reason. My goal. Naruto paused for a moment before continuing. My goal is to one day become Hokage, re-establish my clan, and make the people of Konoha recognize my existence. Kurenai smiled. Good, so Naruto appears to not hold the villagers any ill will for the mistrust and mistreatment they've heaped on him whenever he entered town. In fact, he seemed determined to become the protector of them despite the way they have treated him. He truly is his father's son. Naruto smiled, and as some of his hair got loose from the band, keeping it tight in a ponytail and got blown up in the breeze, Kurenai had a moment of deja vu, remembering a time she had seen the Yondaime Hokage shortly before his sacrifice to stop the Kyuubi. That is a very admirable goal, Naruto. Naruto smiled, and both Hinata and Ino blushed lightly as they looked at him. So kid, I see you aren't going to tell them the rest of the story about yourself yet. Later, Kyuubi. Once I'm sure I can trust them, I'll invite them all to the compound for training, and then I'll tell them everything. Naruto was broken out of his conversation with the Kyuubi by Hinata, beginning her introduction. My name is Hinata. I like people who are cheerful and kind. I dislike mean people. My goal is to one day be a strong kunoichi and stand on my own 2 feet. Hinata's deliberate omission of the Hyuga name was not lost on Kurenai, who had been one of Hinata's escorts to and from the academy while she was a chunin. That is also an admirable goal, Hinata. Kurenai said when Hinata had finished. Now, we have an appointment in a few minutes to get your photos taken for your ninja IDs. After that we'll visit the Hokage so you can turn them in. After that I'll explain what we'll be doing tomorrow. But that Kurenai stood up, followed quickly by her students. She noticed that Ino again dusted herself off, Hinata regained a standing position fluidly, and Naruto did a back roll into a handstand and then pushed off into the air and flipped to land on his feet. That boy seems to revel in his agility. Could he know? Kurenai lead her new genin team off to get their photos taken, smiling all the way. Hokage's office, mid-afternoon. The pictures had gone uneventful, with the exception of Naruto taking a funny pose at first and Kurenai forcing him to retake it. The 3 genin now sat in the Hokage's office while their teacher stood behind them. The Hokage was examining their ninja IDs. Approved. All 3 genin let out a sigh of relief. I'm sorry I had to ask you to take them to get their ID photos taken, but due to us delaying the exams in order to allow Naruto to participate, it's compressed what should have taken an entire week into 2 days. Sarutobi said, taking a puff on his pipe. Both Hinata and Ino looked at Naruto in surprise. The latter looked sheepish and scratched the back of his head with one hand. It was no trouble, Lord Hokage. I was able to prevent Naruto from ruining his ninja ID photo, so it was worth the extra time I had to put in. Kurenai replied. Good, good. Now, I know you have training planned for tomorrow, so bring your team back the next day and I'll give them their first assignment. Naruto grinned widely at this news and exclaimed yada. And both Hinata and Ino smiled at his energy. Now, the rest of the day is yours to do with as you wish, but I want you to meet me at training ground 20 at 9 tomorrow morning. Don't be late and don't eat any breakfast. Kurenai said, addressing her students. Why shouldn't we eat breakfast? Hinata asked, beating Ino to the punch. Because I don't want you throwing up on my during our first training session together. Kurenai replied. The Hokage was about to speak to dismiss the team when his next comment was cut off by the door to his office slamming open, followed by a kid leaping into the room yelling old man fight me. And promptly tripping over his own scarf and slamming face first into the ground. Sarutobi muttered not again, while everyone else in the office looked at the kid in confusion. Damn it. Who set a trap? The kid yelled as he pushed himself up, holding his forehead with one hand. Are you alright? And there isn't a trap anywhere. That was a lanky ninja in black clothes and black sunglasses who had arrived right behind the kid. Who's the kid? Naruto asked, his question directed to the Hokage. I know. You did something. The kid yelled, getting up in Naruto's face. Naruto promptly grabbed him by the front of his jacket and lifted him into the air. Hey Naruto. Let go of him. That's the third Hokage-sama's grandson. The lanky man yelled again. Naruto paused, looking at the lanky ninja for a moment before turning to look at the kid. Go ahead and punch me. The kid yelled at Naruto. Now that he knows who I am, he can't do it PFT, he's just the same as my tutor and everyone else, the kid thought to himself. Do you think I give a damn? Moron, Naruto yelled, dropping the kid and punching him on top of the head. His new teammates and teacher looked at him in shock. What? The lanky ninja exclaimed, but Naruto ignored him as he towered over the kid and spoke. I don't care if you were Kami herself, if you don't show others proper respect you don't deserve it yourself. You barge in here uninvited, challenge the most powerful ninja in the village to a fight with you, barely an academy student, and then trip over yourself. And do you apologize? No. You keep acting like you're all that, claiming that there was a trap or that someone else tripped you when the simple truth is you tripped over yourself. Naruto ranted. Enough of this demon. This is Konohamaru you are addressing. You will address him with the respect due the person who is going to be the next Hokage. The lanky ninja interrupted. Naruto cocked his head and stared at the man. Really? And who the fuck are you? Allowing this punk kid to disturb the Hokage when he is busy? Naruto shot off. The lanky ninja pushed his glasses back up his nose cockily before speaking. I am Ibisu, special elite tutor to those who would be Hokage. And this young man you have just manhandled is my prized pupil, Konohamaru. He will be Hokage someday if he follows my shortcuts, so mind your manners. Ibisu said, more sedately this time. Ah, like I'm going to mind my manners to an arrogant child and an arrogant tutor who preaches bullcrap like shortcuts. The only way to become Hokage is hard work. Naruto shot back. Turning to face Konohamaru again he added one last comment. Remember that squirt. Hard work is the way to go. Shortcuts will only get you killed. Naruto turned and bowed to his sensei as Ibisu began sputtering behind him. Sensei, ladies, I'm sorry for what you are about to see, but this Ibisu is pissing me off and I need to go cool off. I'll be at Ichiraku's at 6 if you still care to join me for dinner. Naruto brought his hands together and performed a series of hand seals. Sateki no Jutsu Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke and was instantly replaced by a tall buxom redhead with whisker markings on her face and carefully placed wisps of smoke just barely covering certain parts of her body. The Hokage and Ibisu were instantly knocked out by jets of blood shooting from their noses. Kurenai had to blink to be sure she wasn't seeing things. Hinata managed to remain conscious, having recognized Naruto's hand seals and correctly interpreted his intentions, but she still had a stream of blood running from her nose. And Ino was out of her seat yelling at Naruto about being a pervert and how could you make a technique like that. Hinata just fought trying to pass out as she admired Naruto's hinged state. At least if Ino gets mad at him when he does this it'll give me an advantage. Hinata thought. Perverts. Naruto said cutely, blowing a kiss towards the unconscious forms of Ibisu and the Hokage before dropping the illusion and exiting the office. Konohamaru looked back and forth between the two prone forms before announcing cool. And running out the door to chase after Naruto. Kurenai looked down as her two remaining students turned to look at her. I swear, I am going to have a talk with that boy about using that technique. Now, go ahead, run along. I'm sure you have stuff you want to do this afternoon. We'll begin training tomorrow morning. Kurenai said, ushering her students out of the room. Looking back at the prone forms of Ibisu and the Hokage, she shook her head before exiting the office herself. Ichiraku Ramen Bar, 6 p.m. Ino and Hinata had spent the afternoon shopping and getting to know one another a little bit better. Naruto on the other hand had spent the afternoon being stalked by Konohamaru, who kept demanding that Naruto teach him the cage killer that he had used on his grandfather. Despite his pranking nature, Naruto did still have a high level of respect for women. He had created the Sateki no Jutsu as a weapon against unsuspecting perverts, but he did not wish to earn the ire of his teammates, sensei, or mother by teaching it to anyone else. Eventually he was worn down and promised to teach Konohamaru the technique someday, as long as he would work hard to learn to be a ninja the proper way, rather than taking Ibisu's shortcuts. After giving the Gaki a list of exercises to do every day to help him build up his chakra, Naruto vacated the area before Ibisu could find him. By the time Ino and Hinata reached Ichiraku they found Naruto and Kiba chatting away amiably. And you say your sensei was caught by that? I swear Kiba, the simplest pranks are the best. High-level ninja get too used to sensei charka or advanced traps that the simple things get them every time. I mean, just this morning I got both my mom and Rin with a bucket of water over the door. Naruto was saying loudly as the old man who ran the shop was preparing several large bowls of ramen. You really shouldn't do that to your mom, Naruto. Hinata said as she took a seat on the other side of Kiba from Naruto. Seriously, you baka. What's wrong with you? Ino asked as she took the seat next to Naruto, smacking him in the back of the head. Kiba laughed as Naruto rubbed at the back of his head. Ow. Hey, I only use it on the deserving. You know, perverts and Mizuki and such. Ino stared at Naruto. You used that on Mizuki? Was that how you defeated him, an underhanded trick? She asked. Naruto suddenly looked uncomfortable, but was saved from having to reply by Hinata. Ino, I don't think Naruto wants to discuss last night yet, so will you please let it drop? He used that technique on Mizuki during our exams because Mizuki had been sabotaging him and he was fed up with it. Hinata spoke, looking Ino straight in the eyes. Oh, Ino responded looking down, feeling guilt for accusing Naruto like that. Here you go kids, a bowl of beef ramen for you Kiba and a bowl of miso ramen and a bowl of pork ramen for you Naruto. Seriously though kid, are you sure you'll be able to eat all you ordered? Old man Ichiraku asked as he served Naruto and Kiba. Naruto, who had dug into his ramen with gusto, stopped eating long enough to reply. I'm sorry old man Sakapemkaming. Was Naruto's hurried reply before he dug back into his food. Hinata chuckled and Ino was struck as she realized the 20 or so empty bowls sitting next to the vats of ramen were likely all for Naruto. They weren't kidding about his appetite and I can't cook it all Ino thought to herself dejectedly. Ino was brought back to reality by old man Ichiraku's daughter, asking her what she would like. Ino ordered a bowl of vegetable ramen. She would have returned to her thoughts, but Hinata spoke up. So Kiba, Hinata said, what's your sensei like? Kiba snorted into his ramen. Our sensei is so lame, I don't even know how he made jounin. He wears a mask over his face and his hit eye pulled down over his left eye and all we learned from his introduction was his name. Naruto snorted. I could tell you a thing or two about him, but he might get annoyed with me. Naruto glanced sideways slyly. Everyone else stopped eating to stare at him. Rayleigh now? Ino asked. And how would you know about his sensei when he himself didn't learn anything about him? Naruto took another slurp of his ramen before responding. Simple. The pervert was one of my father's students. I've known him most of my life. Ino balked before getting the intimation. You mean you made that technique to use against Kiba's sensei? She yelled at him, forcing everyone nearby to cover their ears. Naruto just sheepishly scratched the back of his head. Well, he was a pervert and when my mom would ask him to watch me or help with my training, he'd just spend the time reading those Icha books. He said after a moment. Hinata blushed, having accidentally picked one of said books up in the bookstore once. Her blush deepened as her subconscious replaced the characters in the section she had read with her and Naruto. Kiba snorted. Yeah, well, I hope that isn't true. If my sensei doesn't actually teach me, I'm going to have to find someone to help and that will probably be a pain. Kiba sighed when he had finished speaking. Any further discussion by anyone was stalled by the arrival of Hinata and Ino's ramen and by Naruto's next round. By the time everyone had finished they were all starting to feel tired. They all said their goodbyes and headed in different directions. At least, that's what it looked like at first. 5 minutes after leaving Ichiraku Hinata found herself face to face with a very nervous Ino. Hinata, can I speak with you for a moment? Ino squeaked out nervously, unusual for the normally brash and loud Kunoichi. Go right ahead Ino-chan. Hinata replied. Ino instantly felt a little guilty as Hinata had chosen to mark her as a friend just before she challenged her as a rival. Why do all my friends have to be my rivals? Why? You like Naruto too, don't you? Hinata was taken aback. She had noticed Ino's interest in their teammate but hadn't expected her to be this upfront about it. Yes, I do. Why do you ask? Hinata crossed her arms. Ino looked at the ground again before looking up, determination in her eyes. Because I like him too. He made me reevaluate things, made me realize that the only reason I was even interested in that cold fish of an Uchiha was because a rivalry with Sakura kept me close to her. Ino said firmly. Hinata was surprised. Ino had always seemed to be one of Sasuke's most loyal fangirls. Hinata's face darkened. And, I'm glad to be getting to know you better, but, having finally been knocked out of my stupid ways I've realized something. I want a guy who will smile, who will laugh, who will treat me right, even if he is at times a goofball and an idiot. So know this. If you want Naruto, you'll have to beat me. Hinata's pure and honest laughter rang out, confusing Ino. When she finally stopped laughing she finally answered Ino. Ino, you do realize what Naruto's position means, don't you? Ino stared at Hinata blankly, clearly not knowing what Hinata meant. Naruto is the last male heir to not one but two clans. When he turns 18 the clan restoration laws will go into effect and he'll have to marry multiple women in order to re-establish the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans. Of course, knowing Naruto, he's going to want to marry skilled Kunoichi, not some simpering fangirls, and since those same laws will apply to the Uchiha, we certainly won't have to worry about Sakura, but it means that we both need to become skilled Kunoichi if we want to snag Naruto. Not fight one another. Ino blinked for another moment before replying. How do you know so much about clan law Hinata? You never struck me as the bookish type. Hinata's smile disappeared. It's because someday, I hope to leave my clan. So I have been carefully studying everything I can find on clan law. When the time comes, I want to be able to escape my clan without them being able to use any loopholes or retain any control on me. So far I haven't found a way. Hinata paused for a moment, trying not to cry. But I'll keep trying. I'm sure I'll find something. As Hinata began crying and dropped to her knees, she found herself embraced in a hug by Ino. Don't worry Hinata, everything will be alright. You're a shinobi of the leaf now. I'll support you, and I'm sure Naruto will too. Just, be strong. They stayed like that for several minutes before finally standing again, Hinata wiping the tears from her eyes. So, it's agreed then, right? We'll train to be the best kunoichi possible so that we can get Naruto's attention. Ino said, determination in her eyes, reaching her hand out. It's agreed. We'll get Naruto for ourselves, and we'll keep away any simpering fangirls not worthy of his attention. Hinata said with the same determination in her eyes as she reached out and took Ino's hand, shaking it. After sharing a look both girls separated and headed their separate ways. Uzumaki Namika's compound. Rin looked up from doing the dishes as Naruto swung in through an open window, a backpack full of food on his back. Hi Rin. Is mom still awake? He asked as he swung his pack off and began to unload the contents. Rin chuckled. No, she already went to bed. We missed you at dinner tonight. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Yeah, sorry about that Aunt Rin. My new teammates and I met up with Kiba for dinner. He got stuck with Uchiha and one of his fangirls. Rin winced. Kiba had seemed like a nice boy, and from what she had heard from her friends in Konoha the last loyal Uchiha was a real dead fish of a personality. And what about you Naruto? Who did you get teamed with? Rin asked, drying the final plate and turning to face her nephew. I got placed on a team with Hinata and the Yamanaka girl, Ino. Needless to say, Ino seems to have ceased being an obsessive Sasuke fangirl, which is a good thing. I'm just afraid she might start fangirling on me instead, which is a not so good thing. Naruto shuddered at the thought. He liked girls a lot, but he hated simpering fangirls who couldn't stand on their own 2 feet. He knew too many strong kunoichi to respect such a girl after all. Well, not too bad. Who is your instructor? Rin inquired. Yuhi Kurenai. Naruto replied. Apparently she graduated the academy when she was pretty young, so she must be pretty skilled. Rin thought for a moment. Kurenai oh yes, I remember now. She's supposed to be an expert with ninjutsu. Rin got an evil grin, and Naruto wilted. Which if I'm remembering properly you absolutely suck at. Naruto winced. You don't have to remind me every single time Rin. It's not my fault that my chakra control still needs work. Hey. It's not my fault either Kit. I didn't choose to be sealed in you. Besides, as your chakra coils stabilize and the mixing of our chakras becomes more fluid, the better your control gets. I know Kyuubi. It just gets so tiresome to always be reminded that my control sucks every time Jinjutsu gets brought up, that's all. Rin's laughter interrupted his discussion with the Kyuubi. Sorry Naruto, it's just too easy. Besides, given the prank you pulled this morning it's the simplest and least damaging revenge I could come up with. Now, you should get to bed. You'll have a long day ahead of you tomorrow. Just remember, you need to meet your mother and I at 6 at Hikaru's for dinner. Invite your teammates if you wish. We're going to take you to your new apartment after dinner. Rin didn't get any farther as she found herself embraced in a tight hug by Naruto, who was repeating at hyper speed thank you. Rin just smiled and hugged back until Naruto finally released her. Your mother and I signed the lease earlier today. We'll take care of getting your stuff moved in tomorrow, along with some basic furniture we are having delivered tomorrow. We felt that, well, since you are now a full shinobi of Konoha that you should have a place to live in town. It's too inconvenient for you to be an active shinobi and be living a mile outside of town. Now, go get some sleep. Assuming they haven't changed things since I took my genin exam, you'll have a pretty busy day tomorrow. Naruto grinned and yelled one last thank you back over his shoulder as he shot out of the kitchen. Rin chuckled and went to work putting the groceries away. The members of Team 8 met promptly at 9 the next morning at training ground number 20. Naruto was the first to arrive, and he spent the few minutes he had before the others showed up to scout out the terrain of the training ground out of curiosity. A few minutes later Hinata and Ino showed up together, chatting animatedly about some topic, but Naruto couldn't hear them from where he was. He hopped down and walked over to join them in waiting for their sensei to arrive. Precisely at 9 Kurenai appeared before her students in a leaf shunshin. All 3 genin instantly stood at attention. Kurenai nodded slightly, acknowledging their decorum. Now, listen up. She said abruptly. Training Ground 20 is a variable terrain training ground consisting of wide open spaces and clusters of large boulders. Today's exercise will be your final test. And it has a fail rate of over 66. And it is already guaranteed that at least one of you will fail this test. What? Ino exclaimed loudly, her eyes so wide they had gone white. What the hell are you talking about? I thought we took all our exams already. Kurenai took a deep breath before continuing. All those tests were designed to determine whether you had what it takes to test for genin. This is your real genin exam. Kurenai held up her hand, 2 bells dangling from it. The test is simple. You have until noon to get these bells from me. Those who manage to get a bell will pass and will be given lunch. Those who fail to get a bell will be tied to a post, while those who passed eat lunch and will then be sent back to the academy for another year. As there are only 2 bells, this means that at least one of you is going to fail. Kurenai looked over her students. Ino still looked pissed off, Hinata seemed hesitant, and Naruto was smirking. Cockiness, anger, and hesitancy, Kurenai mentally sighed. How was she ever going to get these 3 to work as a team with those sorts of hang-ups? But that said, your exam starts now. Kurenai punctuated this last part by turning on a timer and vanishing in a leaf shunshin. From her hiding spot Kurenai watched and observed as her team looked around for a few seconds before turning to face one another. Well guys. What do you think? I for one don't buy this whole one person is guaranteed to fail thing. My mom always told me that genin teams are put together to best balance out complementary abilities so that no one team is too strong or too weak. No way they would go to that much effort if 2/3 of the members are just going to be failed during a surprise exam. Naruto closed his eyes as he awaited his teammates' responses. He didn't have long to wait as after a moment Hinata spoke up. Naruto. I don't know if the threat of failing is real or not, but Iruka-sensei always taught us that you should take everything seriously in matters of being a shinobi. I don't think we can afford to assume that it's a ruse of some kind. Naruto met and looked down at the ground for a moment. Well, how about we just make a pact? Ino spoke up. We make a pact to work together to get those 2 bells from Kurenai and then we use a simple game of a chance to determine who gets to eat and who gets tied to the post. Naruto and Hinata looked at one another for a moment before looking back at Ino. I mean, if at least one of us is going to fail no matter what, we might as well work as a team to get the bells and let fate decide who stays back another year. Naruto had to admit that Ino's plan had merit. After thinking it over for a moment he spoke up. I'm an Ino. Hinata, are you okay with this plan? Hinata didn't waste any time speaking up. No, I'm not okay with this plan. She grinned. I'm far more than simply okay with it. Let's get those bells and prove to Kurenai how stupid such a rule is. Hinata stuck her hand out and it was promptly covered by both Ino and Naruto's hands. All 3 genin grinned at one another. Nearly 3 hours later they had had no luck in getting the bells from Kurenai. No matter what they did she always seemed to be one step ahead, even when Hinata utilized her Byakugan to see through the numerous genjutsu that Kurenai had been weaving as they hunted her through training area 20. Currently Naruto was hanging upside down 20 feet above the ground, caught in a simple trap snare Kurenai had lured him into. Ino was nursing a headache from a blow she had taken while trying to snag the bells from Kurenai and Hinata was staying hidden in the bushes. Crap. We don't have much time left. If we don't get those bells soon we'll all fail. Hinata thought as she frantically worked possible means of approach to try to catch Kurenai unawares. She was just about to get totally frustrated when a beetle walked in front of her and began to ride in the dirt. Hinata activated her Byakugan momentarily and realized that Naruto had merely hinged a cage bunshin into a beetle in order to get a message to her. Pretty smart trick she had to admit. You and Ino do a head-on pincer strike on Kurenai. Trust me. What in the world do you have planned, Naruto? Hinata wondered as she wiped away the message before moving out of hiding and motioning for Ino to match her movements. The 2 kunoichi went into a fighting stance as Kurenai appraised them from her position in the middle of the clearing. Any moment now kid. Without any warning Ino and Hinata shot forward, dodging Kurenai's strikes and diving for the bells. But Kurenai performed a kawarimi at the last moment, leaving a section of log in her place. Now. On cue Naruto performed a rapid series of hand seals. Cage bunshin no jutsu. The entire training ground was suddenly covered in thousands of cage bunshin. Hinata caught sight of Naruto in her Byakugan as this occurred and was momentarily confused. 2 colors of chakra? What does that mean? Could this have to do with the secret Naruto is hiding? A second later 2 cage bunshin came scrambling towards the 3 genin over the tops of the boulders, leaping and scrambling on all 4s like animals, others sacrificing themselves to defend them from Kurenai's strikes as the bunshins brought the bells to Ino and Hinata, dropping one in each of their hands as Kurenai re-entered the clearing. Naruto released his seal and the cage bunshin began to vanish rapidly. Naruto cut himself down from the snare and walked over to Hinata and Ino, who had turned to look at him. You 2 deserve it. He said before they could ask. I can always take the exam again next year, but you 2 both have something to prove. Naruto was instantly blown backwards as 2 irate kunoichi began to harangue him for being an idiot. Naruto was saved a beating by Kurenai's decisive interjection. Congratulations. You all pass. Ino and Hinata paused, their fists mere centimeters away from Naruto's face, turning their heads to look back at their sensei. What do you mean we all pass? You told us only two of us could pass. Kurenai smiled softly. I lied. The real purpose of this exam is to determine how you will behave in a situation where one must be sacrificed for the good of the others. It's designed both to test and promote teamwork, as well as to weed out those who do not properly understand a shinobi's role and who care more about their own position and power than that of their team. Kurenai was pleased to observe that all three of her genin were now standing and giving her their full attention. You three not only demonstrated that you can work as a team toward a common goal, even when burdened with the knowledge that one or more of you might not come out of the situation. But you also demonstrated an ability to use one another's abilities to your advantage. Hinata, very nice use of the Byakugan to find where I was hiding. And Naruto, that was an effective, if somewhat unorthodox, use of Kage Bunshin. Flooding the field with them when I used Kawarimi, relying on that momentary feeling of security that ninja falsely have when they use that technique to ambush me and get the bells. Quite inventive. Naruto sheepishly scratched the back of his head at the praise. And Ino, nice use of kunai and senbon to attempt to disable me when you had me in the open. You just need to learn to be less obvious when using them. Now, I did bring bento lunches, but I only brought enough for 3 people. So I've decided that since you made such a spectacular showing, I'm going to take you out for lunch. Her last announcement drew a cheer from Naruto and a chuckle from Ino and Hinata as they turned to go grab their bags from where they had dropped them at the beginning of the exam. Konoha Shopping District, near Hokage's tower. The restaurant Kurenai took them to was called Gilded Edge and catered specifically to Konoha shinobi. Kurenai explained that the owner had lost a leg in the last shinobi war and had retired and founded a restaurant specifically designed to appeal to shinobi. Everything from the decor to the menu was designed specifically to please a shinobi's sense of taste and aesthetics. The building was solidly constructed, with metal reinforcements in the beams and what looked like suet conjuring seals stuck to them at regular intervals. The color scheme was a mix of browns and greens, with very few bright colors. Hinata had to admit, it certainly fit most of the shinobi who were there when they entered. With one noticeable exception, who was sitting at the bar munching on a stick of dango. Every person in the place was wearing a green vest and the drab clothing most Konoha shinobi were known for. While they waited for their food, Kurenai explained how their training was going to go. Unless otherwise instructed, you'll meet me at 9 am every morning at the entrance to training ground 16. We'll work together on training until noon, when we'll grab a quick lunch. Then we'll head to the Hokage's tower and take a D-rank mission. After that the time will be yours to do with as you see fit, but I will be assigning each of you exercises to work on once I've had more time to properly evaluate you. Kurenai-sensei. What kind of training are you going to be giving us? Ino asked. I'm going to be teaching you to be proper shinobi. I'll be helping you discover where your strengths and weaknesses lie and helping you shore up your weaknesses and improve upon your strengths. Kurenai replied. Ino smiled, her curiosity satisfied. When they had finished their meal, Kurenai dismissed them, reminding them to meet her at training ground 16 the next morning. Hinata said her own goodbyes to her teammates and ran off. There was a clan gathering that evening and she wanted to be presentable, even if she did want to leave the clan someday. This left Ino and Naruto standing alone in the middle of a street on a sunny afternoon with absolutely nothing to do. Ino was sorely tempted to ask Naruto out on a date, but she had too much respect for her new friends to do that. She remembered the discussion she had had that morning with Hinata and she didn't want to ruin her new friendship. So, after a few slightly awkward moments she finally spoke up. Well, I think I'm going to head home. That exam today was pretty strenuous and I really don't want to stink like a ferret any longer. Naruto laughed and Ino fought the confusing urge to punch him and hug him at the same time. When Naruto ceased laughing, he just smiled for a moment before replying. That's okay, Ino. I need to go help my mom move me into my new apartment anyways. I'll see you tomorrow morning though, so we won't be apart for too long, gorgeous. Naruto winked at Ino before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Ino stood there dumbstruck. Was he just flirting with me? It was several long moments before Ino could finally move again, but once she did she smiled softly and ran home with a song in her heart. Naruto's new apartment, across the street from Hikaru's, 7 p.m. Finally. Naruto exclaimed, the last of his Kage Bunshin having just put his new couch in place and then dismissed themselves. Naruto dusted his hands off and then stepped back next to his mom and Rin, proudly surveying the last 5 hours of hard work. His apartment was now fully organized and fully decorated. He had a futon couch, a coffee table, and a few armchairs in his living room, along with several bookcases. His kitchen was fully stocked, although Naruto wouldn't need to use it much, given he was living across the street from Hikaru's. His clothes were all organized in his closest end dresser, and he had a second closet for all his shinobi gear. Well, Naruto, it certainly looks organized enough. The only question is how long it will stay that way. Kushina said, smiling. Naruto just snorted. Don't get your hopes up, Kushina. You know better than anyone that Naruto and organized living space just don't mix. Rin added with a grin and a wink at Naruto. So, shall we eat dinner now that the table is finally set up? Both Naruto and Kushina seconded that, and they quickly opened several sealed containers of food from Hikaru's. Naruto dug rapidly into a spicy chicken dish while his aunt and mom both went for the more tame beef teriyaki, and after a few minutes of frantic eating, Rin spoke up after taking a sip of her beer. So Naruto, tell us, how did your first day go? Naruto nearly choked on his food. It took Rin and Kushina several seconds to realize he was trying not to die laughing. When he finally calmed down, Naruto swallowed and took a deep breath. Well, I'm sure it won't come as any surprise to either of you, Naruto said, sending mock accusatory stares at both of them. But today was just another exam, one meant to test our effectiveness and ability to work together as a team. I mean, really mom. You couldn't have given me some warning beforehand. Kushina smiled at her son. You know I couldn't have. The entire point of the exam is ruined if the subjects are informed about its true nature beforehand. Naruto sighed again. Oh well. All's well that ends well. Naruto was interrupted by a yawn. And I guess that should be my cue to head to bed. Night mom. Night Aunt Rin. Naruto said as he got up from the table. Good night Naruto. They both replied as he trudged off to bed. When he was out of earshot they resumed talking quietly. Is the reason he's so tired lately because of what Kyuubi's been doing to his chakra coils? Rin asked softly. Yes, Kushina replied, if I understand what she is doing right, it's taking a lot of energy out of Naruto to perform the adjustments, and especially to perform them safely. Once his coils stabilize he'll get his full energy back. Even without that it's unnoticeable to most people. Both women looked down at the table and sighed. Unbeknownst to them a small red lizard had crawled inside the apartment and listened to the entire exchange. As it crept out of the apartment to report to its master, it met an untimely end as an oddly curved kunai with an 8-pointed star inscribed on it slammed into its skull, killing it instantly. On the other side of the street Oyama Hikaru flicked her wrist and drew the kunai back to her, sliding it back into a hidden holster under her jacket. Hokage's office, 9 p.m. A Sandaime Hokage sat wearily behind his desk. Before him stood 10 Jounin instructors and Iruka, who was reading the collated report on the survival tests. Team 1. Failed. Team 2. Failed. It continued in this manner until Team 7. Passed. Everyone in the room looked at Hada Kakashi in surprise that he had passed a team. Sarutobi merely raised an eyebrow, pleased that Haddock took his request that he train the last Uchiha to heart. Team 8. Passed. The flying colors, I might add. Kurenai interjected, earning her a glower from Iruka before he continued. Team 10. Passed. Team 11. Passed. Iruka finished speaking and rolled up a scroll. So, 4 teams out of 10. Not bad. Not bad at all. Tell me, what are your opinions so far of your teams? Sarutobi asked. A bunch of idiots. Hada Kakashi spoke bluntly. Surprising and inventive. Yuhi Kurenai said proudly. Troublesome. Sarutobi Asuma said, not realizing he had picked up his student's favorite word after only a couple of hours. A bunch of misfits. I'm surprised they passed. Gekko Hate finished with a cough. Sarutobi sighed and stamped several forms, speaking as he did so. Team 7, 8, 10, and 11 are hereby officially convened under the listed Jounin instructors. The members therein are officially registered as Genin of Konoha. Dismissed. The 10 Jounin dispersed in various means, some walking out of the room, while others shunshined away. Haruka remained behind. Okage-sama, I'm worried about Naruto. Haruka said after a few moments. Sarutobi looked up from the paperwork on his desk. I'm afraid that the social isolation he has been under, caused because of the hatred most of the village holds for him, will ultimately lead to him lashing out. Sarutobi could see that Haruka was honestly worried. After a long moment Sarutobi finally replied. I don't think we have anything to worry about, Haruka. Despite that, despite everything that the villagers think about him or have attempted to do to him when he has entered the village, he still views it as his duty as the Yondaime's son to protect Konoha. The Hokage went back to smoking his pipe as he returned his focus to the thrice-damned paperwork. The next morning Naruto arrived at training ground 16 to find Hinata and Ino already waiting for him. The two Kunoichi smiled and waved at him as he walked between the posts. Naruto smiled and waved back before dropping his pack on the ground and dropping to the ground on all fours, promptly beginning a series of push-ups. When he looked up a few moments later he stopped, seeing the confused looks on both Hinata and Ino's faces. What? He asked, you didn't think I was just naturally in this kind of shape, did you? I work out a lot. Naruto grinned and pushed off with his feet, ending in a handstand before he removed one hand from the ground, balancing on a single hand. My dream is to be Hokage one day, after all. That means I need to be the strongest ninja. Naruto gave both girls a fox-like grin before he closes his eyes and began performing hand seals with one hand while he began to push-ups into the air one-handed. Hinata and Ino just stared in shock before turning slowly to look at one another. Both girls shared the same though. Hot. Their various fantasies were interrupted by the arrival of Kurenai, striding confidently between the two posts Naruto had entered earlier. As Naruto launched into the air and performed a flip before landing on his feet, he noticed that his new sensei had several scrolls under her left arm and a few small cream-colored cards in her right hand. "Good morning, team. I trust all of you are ready for your evaluations," Kurenai said as she approached, setting down the scrolls and the cream-colored cards. "Now, first, I need to know what jutsus you all know. It will give me an idea of where your skills with jutsu are, as well as a beginning for me to plan out your training. Naruto, why don't you go first?" Naruto grinned and took a seat in front of Kurenai as she sat down. Ino and Hinata walked over and joined him. Once he was settled, waiting for his two teammates to be seated first, Kurenai noted, Naruto began. "Well, let's see. There's the Academy Jutsus of course, Bunshin, Henge, and Nawanuke. I also know Taiju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Kawarimi, Sateki no Jutsu." All three Kunoichi groaned at the mention of that jutsu. "Raiten, Dingeki Haku, and Senijashu." Naruto finished, smiling. Kurenai had to blink at this last one. "Did you just say Senijashu?" she inquired, suspicious. Naruto sheepishly scratched the back of his head. "Yeah. Why?" Kurenai studied him with a calculating gaze for a moment. "How, may I ask, do you know that jutsu?" she finally asked. Naruto looked at her with confusion. "How? Didn't it say in my file, Kurenai-sensei? I received specialized training from Mitarashi Anko for most of the past year." Kurenai shook her head, sighing. "No matter where I go she still manages to reach me. I swear, Kami must have it in for me," she thought. Naruto-kun, that jutsu. Why is sensei surprised that you know it?" Hinata asked. Kurenai looked up from her musings and watched as Naruto replied. As she did, she finally took a closer look at Hinata. She had escorted her to the academy when she was younger, but there was barely a trace remaining of the shy timid girl she remembered. "Well, probably because it's a rare jutsu and only a few jounins know it, that's all," Naruto replied, shrugging his shoulders. "Well, interesting, Naruto. Now, Hinata, how about you?" Hinata took a breath before speaking confidently. "I don't want to seem timid in front of Naruto," Hinata thought. "Well, I know all three academy jutsus as well. And well, I also know one of my family's special techniques, Haki Rakujikin SHM. Stupid. Getting nervous isn't going to do you any good," Hinata thought to herself. Kurenai blinked. She knows the Haki Rakujikin SHM. Her chakra control must be impressive, even for a Hyuga. She thought to herself. Very impressive as well, Hinata. "And you, Ino?" she asked, turning towards the blonde. Kurenai had to admit to herself that she had been surprised when she was assigned Ino. She had expected Asuma's request that the Ino Shikacho Trinity be formed from this generation. Apparently the Hokage cared more about building strong teams than about giving that lazy-ass son of his an easy job. Ino grinned and leant forward on her knees, excited for her turn. "I hope Naruto is impressed by what I know. I know all three academy jutsus as well, sensei. On top of that I also know my family's Shintention no Jutsu and my father has been teaching me Kawarimi, though I'm having trouble mastering it." Ino-chan," Naruto interrupted, "have you tried visualizing yourself in the object place rather than the object in your place?" Ino looked at Naruto blankly for a moment before replying. "No, my dad says you're supposed to visualize the object in your place. He says doing this when you perform the jutsu right will cause you to switch places with the object." Kurenai was the one to reply, having understood what Naruto was getting at. "Well, that is technically true, Ino, there are those who that just doesn't work for. For some, like Naruto. I'm guessing Naruto's sheepish grin confirmed her suspicions. "And now possibly you, imagining yourself in the object's place is actually easier as you are focusing on your movement and letting the object be swapped by the chakra rather than using more chakra to force the object to come to you and then switch." She looked at Naruto again. "I'm impressed, Naruto. Most shinobi aren't aware of the distinction. I'm guessing you had your own trouble mastering the technique as well." Naruto just nodded. Ino's embarrassment at having trouble with it evaporated as she realized that the guy she now liked had had difficulty learning it as well. Hinata meanwhile felt embarrassed that she hadn't learned the jutsu either. Okay, so jutsu-wise Naruto seems to have learned several, including several advanced techniques. Ino has learned one of her family's special clan techniques and Hinata has learned the first of her clan's most advanced jutsus. I'm very impressed with all of you. Now, I'm not going to teach you any jutsus beyond Kawarimi at first, but I am going to assign some chakra control exercises until I feel you are ready to learn some new techniques. But first, I need to know one thing so I can decide what jutsus to teach you." Kurenai picked up one of the cream-colored cards and held it in her hands. This card, she explained, is a tool used to determine a shinobi's elemental affinity. "Now, which of you know what that means?" Hinata and Ino both raised their hands, remembering the lecture on the subject. Naruto looked slightly confused. "Ino, why don't you explain for Naruto's benefit?" Kurenai asked, smiling faintly. Ino grinned from ear to ear before she began explaining. All shinobi, with very rare exceptions, have an affinity for a specific element. This makes it much easier for them to perform jutsu of that element, as well as giving them the ability sometimes to apply the element to other techniques to modify them. Some people are actually born with multiple affinities of varying strengths, but it's rare. Ino took a deep breath as she finally finished speaking, smiling. Oh okay, that makes sense. Naruto replied enthusiastically, smiling now. Exactly right. Kurenai said. Now, I'll demonstrate how to use the card first, and then I'll explain how they work. Kurenai pursed her lips as she focused some of her chakra into the card, and Hinata, Ino, and Naruto all watched in amazement as the card became soggy. As you can see, the card became soggy. This is because my chakra has a water affinity. If you have a wind affinity, the card will cut in half, it will ignite if you have a fire affinity, crumble to dust for an earth affinity, and crinkle up for a lightning affinity. All you do is hold it and focus some of your chakra into it. But this said, she passed the remaining 3 cards out to her team. Now, you try, and let's see what your affinities are. Kurenai had to admit to herself that she was curious what their affinities would be, simply as their teacher, and not because. Careful kid. I know I haven't brought this up before, but my presence in you could affect this. What? Why? Because it is possible that you may have received my affinity on top of your own. Naruto face palmed inside his own mind. Okay, well, I guess I better hope for the best and hope no one suspects something is up. Ino did say that some rare people have multiple affinities, so hopefully she and Hinata won't suspect anything. While this discussion was going on inside his own head, both Ino and Hinata had successfully used their cards. Naruto noted with some surprise that Hinata's had crinkled and Ino's had turned soggy just like their sensei's. Naruto hurriedly focused on his own card before anyone noticed his distraction. When he focused his chakra in the card, it split in half instantly. Well, not really surprising. My dad was a wind chakra user after all. Only to have both halves ignite in a bright flame before burning to ash. Ino, Hinata, and Kurenai all looked at Naruto, a sweat drop on Kurenai's forehead. Well, that was certainly surprising. It appears that Naruto has a very strong affinity both for fire and wind. Kurenai said, compassing herself. Ino, you have an affinity for water. Hinata, you have an affinity for lightning. Hinata smiled and Ino cheered. Kurenai gathered their destroyed cards and stuck them in a pouch before standing. Okay, now that I know that, I'll instruct you in today's exercise. Kurenai said as her students all stood. Now, one of the most fundamental abilities a shinobi needs is good chakra control. There are a few exercises used to improve one's chakra control, and learning them also makes a shinobi more versatile in the field. The first and easiest of these is the ability to extrude chakra from the soles of your feet in order to stick to objects. Kurenai demonstrated by performing a hand seal and walking over to a tree. She promptly proceeded to walk up a tree until she was hanging from the bottom of a branch about 30 feet up. Remaining attached to a tree requires a small amount of chakra, but it must be precise. And because the soles of your feet are the hardest areas to mold chakra, if you can master this, you can theoretically master any jutsu. Kurenai released her chakra flow and dropped, flipping and landing on her feet. Now, I want each of you take a kunai and mark the point you reach. Use that line as a measure of how far you have gotten and try to get farther. Now, as you are just starting, you should use a running start to get going up the tree. Kurenai turned and began to walk back towards her bag. Behind her, she could sense 2 of her students begin to mold chakra so that they could expel it from their feet, but the third, sensei. Is it alright if I ask you for another exercise? Maybe to jutsu practice or a jutsu I could start learning? Naruto asked from behind her. She turned around and saw Ino and Hinata make it about halfway up a tree out of the corner of her eye. And why do you ask that? Do you think you are too good for a simple tree climbing exercise? Kurenai crossed her arms. No. It's just that I've already mastered how to walk on surfaces and how to walk on water. Naruto replied with a shrug. Kurenai looked at Naruto in shock. He keeps surprising me. Well, I could do some taijutsu sparring with you while Hinata and Ino work on the tree climbing. Kurenai replied after a moment. Naruto grinned at this. Meet me over at the field of posts over there and we'll do some sparring. Kurenai turned to face her other 2 students. Both of you keep working on this exercise. I'm going to spar with Naruto and evaluate his taijutsu, as it's been made clear that his exam scores are inaccurate. Ino was too busy focusing on climbing the tree without falling to hear her, but Hinata nodded in acknowledgement. When Naruto finally joined Kurenai at the posts, she found that he had shed his jacket and was instead simply clothed in his pants and his green undershirt. Naruto hopped up onto a post about 15 feet away from her, balancing smoothly on one foot, the rest of his body slipping into a taijutsu stance that she well recognized. DB-style Damanko. You taught him your taijutsu too, Kurenai thought dismayed. Sparring with her new genin was going to be a challenge right from the start, it seemed. Without any forewarning, Kurenai rapidly moved across the posts, throwing the first set of blows. She was not surprised when Naruto rolled around her attacks like a snake, spiraling and striking back with light quick strikes, targeting weak points and pressure points. I take it back. You didn't just teach the Gaki your style. You made sure he mastered it. Kurenai screamed inside her own head as the Taijutsu spar developed rapidly into an all-out battle that had the Jounin pulling out all the stops just to keep up. That afternoon, Team 8 gathered in the Hokage's office to receive their first mission. The three Genin's excitement at finally receiving a mission quickly died as they realized that D-rank missions were little more than glorified chores, in this particular case, helping rebuild a bar that had been damaged the previous week in a drunken shinobi brawl. Kurenai raised an eyebrow when Naruto let out a loud laugh when he heard the name of the bar. She quickly realized that Anko must have told the Gaki about the fight, which she had been a part of. Kurenai was privately thankful that she hadn't let her friend drag her out that night, or she'd have ended up involved herself. As the three Genin went to work repairing the interior of the restaurant, Kurenai was quietly thankful that she seemed to have three dedicated and driven shinobi to train. The next 3 weeks consisted of a standard routine. In the mornings, Kurenai would either have them working on sparring, chakra control exercises, and a lecture on shinobi tactics or jutsus. In Naruto's case, she spent extra time sparring with him and was surprised one day 2 weeks into the routine when she arrived to find he had arrived early and that there were about 50 clones, all meditating in the middle of the training ground. When she had asked him what he was doing, his only reply was that he was communing. Kurenai of course realized instantly that he must mean with his prisoner. When she asked why he needed 50 clones to commune with his prisoner, Naruto's reply drew a raised eyebrow from the Genjutsu mistress. Oh, they aren't communing. They're all thinking about applications and way to modify jutsus. There is an idea I've had for a technique, but I first need to think through a number of permutations before I try to develop it. He said matter-of-factly. Kurenai couldn't believe her new student was talking so blithely about developing new techniques, but then, given how surprising his skills had turned out to be already, she wouldn't be surprised. If the Gaki could actually pull it off. He was his son after all. She didn't have a chance to inquire further though as her other 2 students showed up. 3 weeks into this routine was when Kurenai finally began lecturing on the subject of her specialty, Genjutsu. Sitting in front of her students on a grassy section of the training ground, Kurenai began her lecture. Ninjutsu differs from ninjutsu in that rather than using chakra to perform direct attacks or manipulations of the environment, you instead use your chakra to manipulate others' perception of the environment. The level of control and focus required is also greater than most ninjutsus. She spoke, happy to be discussing her specialty. She noticed that all 3 of her charges were paying rapt attention, as they always did when she lectured. Well, I guess it is good for my ego that they hang on my every word. Kurenai thought, smiling to herself. Sensei. Does that mean Genjutsu are not combat techniques? Ino asked with a look of curiosity on her face. Quite the opposite, Ino. Not only can Genjutsu, when applied properly, give a ninja an advantage over the enemy, but some of the more powerful Genjutsu techniques are capable of injuring or even killing a target simply by the power of suggestion. Kurenai noticed that as much attention as Naruto and Hinata were paying her lecture that Ino had an even more interested look on her face as usual. In fact, Kurenai noted, she hasn't shot Naruto a blushing glance once during this lecture. In fact, some of my more powerful techniques can bind or kill an opponent with the power of suggestion. All it takes is for them to be distracted for mere moments, and my Genjutsu can get its hooks in them. Kurenai noticed that Ino was now staring at her with a look of awe on her face, while Hinata's was merely thoughtful. Nah, Hinata. I guess all this is pretty boring to you, since you can see through any Genjutsu with those Byakugan eyes of yours, nah? Naruto asked, interrupting with a grin before Kurenai could continue. Hinata blushed, and Kurenai noticed Ino look at her with a jealous look. Those girls, they really should just tell Naruto how they feel, but the boy seems oblivious. Kurenai thought, shaking her head ruefully. Meanwhile, Naruto was dealing with inner thoughts himself. I'm telling you, kid, both girls like you. Just ask one out already and end this dance. It's annoying. Kyuubi sighed. Things were so much simpler in the summoning realm. You like someone, you jump their bones and move on. Shut up, Baka Kitsune. I'm trying not to cause a conflict between my teammates. If I ask one of them out, the other will sure to be disappointed. Naruto shouted back, mentally bopping Kyuubi over the head. Yes, well, it's true that Hinata's eyes will allow her to see through most Genjutsu, they must be active for them to work. She can still be caught by a Genjutsu as easily as either of you if you aren't aware of your surroundings. Now, the reason I've brought up Genjutsu is that the Hokage has informed me that he is going to assign us and another team a C-rank courier mission next week. Kurenai continued, drawing her 3 students' attention back to her. Sensei? Hinata asked quietly. If it's only a C-rank mission, why are 2 teams being assigned to it? Because this is a regular courier run, there is the danger that another country might try to intercept it. It's not highly sensitive material, but it's economically valuable. Since there is no known plan to steal the information, it's merely listed as a C-rank mission, but the Hokage still assigns 2 teams since the likelihood of it being upgraded to a B or even A-rank mission is high. Said, explaining in her lecture mode. Oh. Was Hinata's short reply. Kurenai smiled at the girl before continuing. The point of all this is that during the mission, there is the possibility that Tiki-nin might attempt to steal the information. If they do, they are likely to use a Jinjutsu to trap and distract us to make their job easier. I want you all able to recognize and break a Jinjutsu before that happens. Kurenai now had their full rapt attention. Now, there are 2 primary methods of breaking a Jinjutsu upon oneself. The first method involves suppressing one's chakra momentarily, causing the hooks of the Jinjutsu to slip. This is good if the Jinjutsu is tied to your own chakra. But if the Jinjutsu is tied to the natural chakra around you, or even to other ninja, it won't be as much help. This is the easiest method though. The other method involves channeling your own chakra into the subject of the Jinjutsu or illusion and disrupting it. However, which an area Jinjutsu or multiple subjects caught under it, this method is very impractical, as you would have to perform it individually on every single person caught in it. Naruto, could you use Henge please? Naruto grinned and performed a few quick hand seals, transforming into a copy of Uchiha Sasuke with a puff of smoke. Hinata blinked in surprise, and Ino stared at Naruto. Inside Ino was torn between a sudden desire to glomp him, the desire to smack him over the head. Why do I feel this way? I gave up on Sasuke, I like Naruto now, Ino thought. Hinata, with your Byakugan activated you can tell that Naruto is under a henge and you can see through it. But unless you do something he's still under the henge and no one else can see him properly. But if I do this, and Kurenai brought her hands together to form a seal, saying Kai. Naruto's henge died in a puff of smoke, leaving the genin blinking. I can break simple illusions and Jinjutsu. Kurenai saw both Ino and Hinata's faces light up, but Naruto's face darkened. Is he annoyed that there is a method to break his henge? Kurenai wondered. She didn't have to wonder long though. Kurenai-sensei? Naruto asked. The fact that he used her name in this private place rather than simply calling her sensei told her he had something serious to ask. For reasons I'd rather not talk about right now, it's impossible for me to suppress my chakra. And my control isn't fine enough to perform the second method, at least not at that scale. Are there any other methods? Naruto asked with a questioning look. How do you know your control isn't fine enough, Naruto? Kurenai asked. Her question was swiftly followed by Hinata's comment that Naruto should have more faith in yourself. Naruto sheepishly scratched the back of his neck before continuing. Well, my aunt tried to teach me that method. If you could put a light Jinjutsu on a kunai or something I could demonstrate. Kurenai, curious as to what sort of ability he could have developed, pulled out a kunai and hinged it into a brick. Naruto took it from her proffered hand and placed it flat on the ground, pressing all 5 fingers of his right hand on top of it. Naruto smirked and then Kurenai felt a small pulse of chakra and suddenly the illusion vanished as if a wave had rolled over it. Her eyes opened wide in surprise. My, this is surprising. It seems that you can use a much more complicated technique. She said. All 3 genin looked at her in confusion, so she began to explain. What Naruto just did is a variation on the third method of removing a Jinjutsu. It's rarely taught as it requires a large amount of chakra and is indiscriminate in what Jinjutsu it affects. Hinata, you might be able to learn this if you wish, but Ino, I'm sorry to say that you likely lack the necessary skill to perform it. Ino looked dejected at this, but Kurenai noticed that Hinata was quietly comforting the girl. The reason is because what Naruto did is similar in nature to the Hyuga Gyuukin. He projected a blast of chakra from his hand in such a manner as to wipe away any illusions in place. Hinata, if we can teach you to release the chakra as a diffuse wave rather than a strike, you may be able to learn this method as well. But, as you witnessed, its usefulness is limited to removing small illusions. The true third method actually involves a 360-degree release of chakra in this manner, allowing a shinobi to completely slip free of any Jinjutsu on them without requiring hand seals, and in the case of those with a larger chakra reserve, allows them to remove Jinjutsu from their fellow shinobi. For the purposes of this mission, I'm guessing you want to be taught this more difficult method then? Kurenai asked, sighing as all 3 genin's faces lit up. Well, better a group of overachievers than a lazy Nara, a hungry Akimichi, and an Aburam. Kurenai respected the Aburam clan's skills, but their stoic behavior just creeped her out. She proceeded to spend the rest of that morning teaching them the harder method of breaking Jinjutsu. While Ino barely managed to free herself using it, she demonstrated that she had mastered the Kai ability simply from watching Kurenai demonstrate it once. Hinata was able to create a pulse that reached a few feet away from hers, but it left her sweating and grinning afterwards. And Naruto caused several passing Anbu to come investigate the source of a chakra pulse that covered almost all of Konoha. Kurenai shook her head sighing as she explained to the Anbu just what had happened. Thankfully most of the villagers bought the Hokage's explanation to the council that an experimental jutsu had gone wrong. At night at dinner Kibble let out a long howling laugh when Naruto informed him of his latest prank. 2 days later, northern Wind Country, shortly before dusk, the group of Iwa Nin were heading towards the border, hurriedly moving, hoping to exit the country of wind, before Tsunagakure realized that they had kidnapped one of the Kazukiyage's children. The leader, Shishiji Yogur, was disguised as Asuna Anbu, but his mask now dangled from his neck, revealing his Iwa headband and his scarred face. Shishiji was a veteran of the war with Konoha and received his injuries in battle against Konoha's Kairoi Senki himself. He was followed by 3 other Iwa Nin, all disguised as Suna Anbu. 2 of them carried swords at the ready, prepared to intercept any threat, while the third and largest, a bulky ninja named Dyama Ishii, carried an unconscious and bundled up blonde Kunoichi. The ogre grinned as the tree line of Hashi no Kuni, the relatively small country situated between the Wind Country and the Earth Country. The section they were heading for was comprised of huge redwood forests almost the entire way through, with the exception of a couple major trade routes. It would limit any chance of them being spotted by shinobi of the small nation's village. While Iwagakure and Nagareba Shigakure had a peace treaty, Yogur did not wish to push it by alerting them that Iwa had used their country as an escape route for a kidnapping attempt with their neighbors, Tsunagakure. He was under orders to lie about the identity of his prisoner if he did encounter any Nagurabashi Nin on the return trip. Almost there. There is no sign of pursuit, so if we can just make it safely to the tree line, Suna will never be able to track us. He thought, his grin deepening. And when we get back, this little bitch will be pumped for all the information we can get. And maybe that Tsuchikage will let me have her as a toy after they have finished interrogating her. The ogre was torn from his dark musings as a huge stone wall rose out of the desert sands before them, stretching far off in both directions and completely blocking off the forest. State your business, Shishiji Yogur. A gruff male voice came from the base of the wall, drawing Yogur's attention and ire. How dare you insult me, you piece of Nagurabashi Ben. Yogur screamed, veins popping out on his face. One of his ninjas stepped closer to him and spoke softly, calming him down. Sir? You did it again. The ogre blinked and then looked around sheepishly. He had the bad fortune of being named by a drunk uncle who thought it would be hilarious to name his new nephew after himself. Unfortunately, he named him after the nickname he had received during an earlier war. Ahem. The Nagurabashi Nin cleared his throat. The ogre turned his attention back to the man who stood in front of him. He stood nearly 7 feet tall with decent girth, much of it clearly muscle. He wore intricate black-plated armor with the crest of Nagurabashi's Kakojiman clan, a clan of Doton specialists, emblazoned on it in green, and had a huge black sword strapped to his back. He had long wild flowing brown hair and his face was covered in a series of red markings. He wore a plated hit-eye that wrapped around his entire head, but instead of the usual 8-pointed star of Nagareba Shigakure no Sado, it bore the kanji for turtle. He looked to be in his 30s, and his dark green eyes sparkled mischievously in the fading sunlight. The ogre recognized him instantly from a captured copy of another Hidden Villages bingo book. The Kojiman Isamu, the Iron Turtle. He said, gritting his teeth. The so-named Isamu blinked. I wasn't aware I was famous enough to be known in Iowa. The black-armored ninja mused, seemingly ignoring Yogur for a moment. Amid Isamu, I don't have time for delays. I have an important package to return to Iwagakure and it can't wait. Move aside and let us pass. Tell the Ryu that Iwagakure will pay the usual fee for using your country as a travel path. Isamu tut-tutted Yogur, waggling a finger back and forth. I am afraid that the Ryukage will not accept it this time. We received an official request for a mission and were dispatched to find you and retrieve your package. The ogre growled, both in anger that his mission was actively be interfered with by the Nagurabashi Nin and outrage that the scum had dared to refer to the leader of his pitiful little village with the title of Cage. As he prepared to speak he noticed that all 3 of his underlings were on heightened alert, having caught Isamu's indication that he wasn't alone. And just who gave you this mission request? Yogur growled, his hands twitching, aching to perform a Doton jutsu and kill the interfering Isamu. From the Kazukiyage himself. Isamu replied, his voice becoming like steel. Ren, Sara, Arashi. By the order of the Ryukage himself you are authorized to use any means necessary to recover the target. The ogre did not hear their response so much as see it. At the remaining 3 cardinal direction geysers erupted from the desert, one of wind and sand to the south, one of water to the west, and one of fire to the east. When the geysers died down 3 Nagurabashi Nin were revealed standing there, their hands flashing through hand seals. The ogre and his squad barely had time to dodge as 4 elemental pillars sped through the desert and collided where he had been standing. He barely had time to reorient himself though before he found all 4 Nagurabashi Nin running towards him and his squad. The ogre prepared to square off with Isamu himself as Dyama Ishii dropped the bundled kunoichi to the ground and brought his armored right arm up to block several kunai thrown by the Kaiten user. Meanwhile, his remaining two teammates, Ryoma Ken and Itsubori Shin, faced off with the Fuetin and Suitin users respectively. The ogre was very quickly in a running battle with the powerful Isamu, who seemed to be able to channel his chakra into his iron knuckles. He dodged and blocked the blows sent by the powerful Jounin for several seconds before he saw his opening and dove under the leaping Isamu's guard, slamming a pair of kunai through an opening in his armor and straight into his chest. Or so he thought. Isamu made a great show of clutching his chest and stumbling backward before he suddenly recovered and started laughing. Reaching up, he pulled the two kunai out from where they had slid under his armor, revealing the tips to have been flattened and spread out, making them harmless. "Now it's my turn," he said, a demonic gleam in his eye. Before Yogur could react, Isamu bit one of his thumbs and spread the blood on his face, tracing the red lines. He then rapidly performed a series of hand seals and then slammed both palms on the ground. "Uchius no Jutsu. Adamantas," he said, his voice cold as steel. There was a puff of smoke and then the sun was blocked out. Yogur barely had time to look up before the foot of a massive armored turtle squashed him into the desert and unconsciousness. Isamu grinned darkly. "Checkmate," he said quietly. He stood and then walked over to where the bundled kunoichi had been dropped, picking her up and shining onto the summoned turtle's head, setting her down carefully. Meanwhile, Yogur's three underlings were still occupied with their fights. Ishii was still unscathed, using his heavy armor to deflect all of his opponent's incoming weapons and using Doten Doroku Geshi to defend against the numerous Kaiten techniques that he had used against him. Finally, his opponent pulled back, seemingly breathing heavily as he analyzed his opponent. Ishii stared back, finally getting a good look at him. Ishii's opponent looked to be in his late teens or early 20s and wore light black armor over a fiery red and black jacket and black pants. He had a large sword like his sensei strapped to his back, wrapped in black cloth, and his armor bore a sigil of a dragon and a phoenix locked in eternal combat. His fiery spiky red hair waved in the wind and his eyes glimmered with dark humor from a face covered with gold and silver markings. Ishii noticed with a little surprise that the brat's eyes were heterochromatic. His right eye was a crimson red, but his left was a pure glacial blue. Ishii grinned before speaking. "Give it up, you little punk. You can't touch me, so why don't you just surrender? If you do, I promise not to hurt you much." Ishii began laughing hysterically, blocking a trio of kunai thrown at him with his right arm. He was too busy laughing to notice that only two of the kunai had deflected away. The third had seemingly melted and flattened against his arm guard. "I don't think so, team. In fact, you are so weak that I'm not even going to bother using that against you," the Kaiten user said, smirking and closing his eyes, bringing his hands together and rapidly forming a complex set of seals as a black chakra began to manifest around him. "Instead, I will defeat you with one blow," the Kaiten user said matter-of-factly. A vein threatened to explode from Ishii's forehead. "Why, you little punk," he yelled as he rushed forward, "I'm going to kill you." The Kaiten user smirked and waited until the last second. Just as Ishii was about to bring his right fist down on him, glowing with chakra, the young man opened his eyes as he finished on the Ryu seal and then spread his hands apart. "Boom," he said as Ishii's right arm literally exploded in a spray of blood, spinning away from him. Ishii's sudden unbalanced state caused him to crash past the Kaiten user and leave a trench in the desert sand. Slowly he struggled to get back up as he bled out from his right shoulder. As Ishii stood and turned, he was suddenly struck by the Kaiten user's killing intent and stuck in place, staring in fear at his eyes. The whites of the Kaiten user's eyes had turned pitch black, his iris black and surrounded by a crimson ring. His pupil had turned a dark blue and circling it were three blue triangles, the tips pointed inwards. As the Kaiten user approached, Ishii finally broke free from the effect of the killing intent, raising his remaining arm and charging, prepared to crush the young man. "I'll kill you for this, you little shit," he screamed, his eyes wild from rage. The Kaiten user watched Ishii's approach coldly, the triangles in his eyes spinning. He slipped under Ishii's blow and slammed his palms into Ishii's torso, right over his heart. Ishii only had enough time to notice the change in the young man's eyes before the young man spoke, his voice suddenly deeper and striking fear into Ishii's heart. "Kage. Kuken Uzumaki." The Ama Ishii spat up blood as a hole was literally ripped in his back by a spinning storm of chakra, a mixture of blue and black. As Ishii's bleeding corpse collapsed on top of the Kaiten user, he dismissingly tossed him aside, his expression dark and cold, his mysterious eyes overlaid by a crimson and blue glow. "Checkmate," he said. Itsubori Shin was really becoming bored with his opponent. The Suitin user had seemed like an interesting opponent at first, but all she did was to dodge around and toss kunai at him. They were far too easy to dodge, so he merely deflected them and let the poor kunoichi think she was actually giving him a fight. The short kunoichi wore light armor, black like her sensei's, a black face mask that left only her eyes and part of her face visible, and had a positively enormous sword strapped to her back, wrapped in blue cloth. Her green hair flew in the winds that now covered the battlefield, and her dark purple eyes glared as the agile Iwanin managed to deflect her latest set of kunai. Damn, I guess I'm going to have to actually use that in order to defeat this bastard. She thought, her hand inching towards the hilt of her sword. Before the young shinobi was able to draw her ridiculously oversized blade, though her opponent was knocked flying, as Dyama-ken was slammed into him by a visible wave of air. The kunoichi turned her head to see one of her teammates come flying towards the downed ninja on a spinning ball of air, his hands already performing the seals for one of his favorite jutsus. She shook her head as her teammate called out in a surprisingly cheery voice. Raiden. Mukinkaku was shy. A blue lightning bolt leapt from the blonde ninja's hands and struck the two downed shinobi as they tried to stand. Their legs instantly gave way, and when they realized they couldn't feel or move them, they began haranguing the two genin like schoolyard bullies caught in their own trap. The kunoichi grinned as her teammate settled down beside her. Good work, Arashi-kun. I'm impressed. You were able to completely disable their legs this time without affecting any other part of their bodies. The kunoichi and Arashi both casually sidestepped a pair of kunai thrown by the down and angry Iwanin, who were currently trying to crawl towards them. Well, I have been practicing Ren-chan. Hey, would you go on a date with me as a reward? Arashi asked, leaning in towards her with an idiotic grin on his face. Arashi was promptly introduced to Mother Earth by Ren's first. Baka. She muttered, stepping forward towards the two downed ninja. When she got close enough she performed a few rapid hand seals, retracted her arms, and then thrust them out straight at her opponents. A pair of small bones shot out from both palms and struck both downed shinobi in the center of the foreheads. The electric discharge knocked both unconscious. Techmate. Ren said smirking, a habit she had picked up from her sensei. Both genin turned, intending to assist their teammates if need be. They were just in time to witness Dyama Ishii's bloody demise at the hands of their third teammate. Meh. Ren spat. Why does Sora always have to make such a mess when he plays with his prey? She asked of no one in particular. Because he and Fukushu are alike in many respects, they are hunters of the first degree, and sometimes they just need to have fun when the prey gives them no real challenge. Ren sighed. Yeah, I guess you are right about that, Fenrir. She thought back. The demon's only reply was to send her the impression of a grinning opaque blue wolf, grinning and laughing uproariously. Sora, Ren, Arashi, report. Kokoji Minasamu's voice came over their radios. Reaching up and pressing a button on their headsets, Arashi and Ren responded. Raikai. Ren watched as Sora took a deep breath and brought his hands together in a Ryu seal. Recognizing the signs of him calming down after using that technique, she sighed and triggered her headset again. Isamu, Sora is in cool down. We'll collect him and return to you. Ren out. Ren turned to see Adamantis towering over the desert, Isamu sitting on the giant turtle's head grinning and waving at them, and grinned. Team Turtle's first mission after getting out of the hospital had been a success. The last week of training had come and gone. 3 days before they were due to receive their assignment, Kurenai was informing them that she was changing up their routines and that she had presents for all three of them. Now, do all three of you remember when tested you to determine your elemental affinity? Kurenai asked. She was sitting with her students in a booth at the Gilded Edge. As usual, Naruto was pinned between Ino and Hinata, which earned a small smile from Kurenai. Those two. It's always the same thing with them. Either trying to outdo the other or hanging off of Naruto as unobtrusively as they can. The Jinjutsu mistress shook her head ruefully. Hi sensei. All three genin chimed together, identical grins plastered on their faces. Well, since we are going to be on a mission soon and thus will be unable to practice our regular routine, I figured that it was time to give each of you some new jutsus to learn. Kurenai would have sworn before this day that you couldn't really be blinded by a smile. Today, she was sorely tempted to try to break whatever Jinjutsu had to have been cast on the faces of her three students. Calm down, you three. Now, I need to explain a few things first before I give you these. First off, we will not be doing any more missions until the Hokage assigns us the courier mission. This means that this afternoon, tomorrow, and the next day will be split between Taijutsu practice and all three of you practicing your jutsus. I will give you tips if you ask for them, but I fully expect all three of you to be able to learn these techniques without additional guidance from me. This is the reason I have had you working so hard on building your chakra as well as chakra control over the past 3 weeks. Kurenai emphasized this with a smile towards the two kunoichi. They had both mastered the tree climbing exercise in a single day and had mastered water walking almost as quickly. Now, first we'll start with Ino. Because your affinity is water, just as mine is, I was able to select 2 fairly easy but supremely useful techniques for you to learn. Kurenai said, noting Ino's smile when she mentioned her own affinity. Kurenai pulled a pair of scrolls out of her bag and handed them to Ino, who unrolled them both and read the technique names at the top. Kurigakur no Jutsu Sensei, why is this technique named after another village? Ino asked, looking up with a confused look on her face. Because that is a very old Suiton technique that predates the founding of the hidden villages. It is supposedly one of the oldest Suiton jutsus known. It is also one of the most versatile techniques. While it may only be a D-rank jutsu, the Suiton Kurigakur no Jutsu is often used as a prelude to far more powerful Suiton jutsus, as it is able to saturate the air around you with water, making it much easier to draw on. Ino nodded, paying rapt attention. Kurenai noted that both her teammates were grinning and paying close attention as well. Kurenai smiled and continued. Your second jutsu is a direct combat jutsu and can be made much more powerful for much less chakra cost, assuming you've cast Kurigakur already. The technique causes you to gather water in your mouth and spit out a large bowl of water at your opponents. While this may not stop a kunai, it can stop Kaiten techniques of equivalent strength, as well as carrying a mighty punch when it impacts with a target. All three genin were silent for a moment before Naruto spoke up, making Kurenai shake her head and sigh. So basically it's a giant attack Lugi of Doom? He asked, his eyes sparkling mischievously. Naruto was promptly introduced to Mr. Table by the fists of two annoyed Kunoichi. Kurenai ignored Naruto's question and turned to Hinata.